All right, well, welcome everybody to the October meeting of the Urban Forestry Commission, City of Asheville. I'd like to welcome everybody here today. We will start with some introductions. So my name is Amy Smith. I'm the chair of the Urban Forestry Commission, and I'll just call on some people as I see you on my screen, starting with the commission members. So Ed.
Ed Macy, Urban Forestry Commission.
And Perrin.
Perrin DeYoung, Urban Forestry Commission. Hello, everyone.
And Patrick.
Patrick Gilbert, Vice Chair, Urban Forestry Commission.
Steve. Steve, you're on mute.
Forgot. Steve Hendricks, Urban Forestry Commission.
Thanks. And Sharon?
Sharon Summerall, Urban Forestry Commission, TRC representative.
All right. And as of right now, I do not see Dawn Chavez, Cecil Bothwell, or Roy Smith. They may join us momentarily. So introductions from city staff. Nancy?
I'm Nancy Watthurst, DSD Stormwater Supervisor and Staff Liaison to Urban Forestry Commission.
And Haley?
Haley Mahoney, Development Services Planning Technician, Staff Assistant to the Urban Forestry Commission.
Thank you. And Monty?
I'm Monty Clampett. I'm a Site Inspection Supervisor.
Thank you. Sasha? Sasha, you're on mute. Thanks.
Sorry, I'm Sasha Vertinsky. I'm an urban planner in planning and urban design.
Thank you. Chris?
Good afternoon. Chris Collins, Division Manager with Development Services for the City of Asheville.
Thank you. Ben?
Hey, good afternoon. Ben Woody, Development Services Director.
Thank you. Ricky?
Zoning Supervisor with DSD.
Thank you. Eric?
Hi, I'm Eric Etcherton, Senior Assistant City Attorney with the City Attorney.
Thank you. And Mark Foster?
Hey there, Mark Foster, City Arborist, Public Works Department.
All right, thanks. Kim, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, everyone, for being at this meeting today. My name is Kim Roney, and I serve on the City of Asheville City Council, and I'm your liaison.
All right, thank you. I think that's all the city staff. I see some other people have joined us for alternative compliance. So if you want to introduce yourselves, Rob?
Hey, I'm Rob Dahl. I'm a landscape architect with Siteworks Studios, and I'll be representing the 50 Collier Avenue project today.
Thank you. And I see Tyler.
Hi, I'm Tyler Kelly, a planning technician, DSC.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Haven't met you before. And I see Shelly, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Shelly Hummel. I'm the owner of 424 Sunset Drive, and my husband, Joe, is
Hello.
here as well.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. All right. Did I miss anybody? Speak up. I think I got everybody. All right. Thanks again, everyone, for being here today. We will start with calling the meeting to order and approval of the minutes. Hopefully everybody saw the action minutes in the agenda documents. So it's a nice table layout. So I see a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
So move.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. So we will do a roll call vote, starting with Patrick.
Aye.
Ed.
Unmute.
Couldn't hear you, Ed.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you call me.
Oh, sorry.
Aye.
Thank you. Sharon.
Aye.
Stephen.
Aye.
Perrin.
Aye.
And I'm aye. All right, so the minutes are approved. And then we'll jump into alternative compliance, starting with 50 Collier. So I assume we have a presentation on this one. We'll go ahead and pull that up, and if city staff wants to get started.
Sure. Well, Nancy's pulling that up. You're fine, Nancy. So 50 Collier is a level 2 project that is in the development review process right now. It has been to TRC and hasn't gone further. Its next stop will be at Development Review Committee in a couple of weeks. You can go forward, Nancy, if you want. And I have a small correction here. Basically, the landscape standard is for 6 large trees on both Millard and Collier. And on both of those streets, there are MSD lines, I believe, and I think there's even a water line on Collier as well. So there's conflicts. Those lines are right in the sidewalk, which creates a conflict. Next. So here's the site. It's where the wake sculpture is. I guess I just read that it's it's in the process of being removed from the site. Keep going. And you can see actually here the power lines there on Collier. Kind of in the last couple weeks, we became aware of that the power line is being relocated. So now they can actually put large trees instead of small trees here. So that's why there's some inconsistency in the presentation. Next. Here's the site. Next, Nancy. So here's the site plan, and I highlighted the water and MSD lines for you all. And this is their proposed site plan where you can see the tree planting scheme. So they've worked with both Asheville Water and MSD to approve the planting of these street trees. So that was really great news, because I was worried that we were going to end up with planters instead of street trees. So next. So really the main issue here, and these are silvicels, the main issue is just the spacing of these 3 trees on the southern end of Collier, and they're very close to 15 feet. And I was kind of hoping to not have to come to you all, but I guess we don't have that ability to just kind of waive that. So you can see on the first 2 trees, there's a spacing of 14 feet and 11 inches, and the second 2 trees is 14 feet 6 inches. So that's really the only thing we're here for. Next. And they're placing the trees to frame the windows, and there's also entrances and exits. So I feel like they're placed appropriately, and staff basically is supporting this request. I guess the last slide is just for your discussion. And that's the end of my presentation.
All right, thank you. Did anyone else want to speak about the project before we ask questions?
And Rob Dahl is here, as you know, with the project.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions. I think you covered it well. We're sort of sandwiched between some easements here, so we're trying to do the best we can.
Okay, I'll open it up for questions or discussion.
This is Ed. I have a question. I'm glad that you highlighted the silvicels on the project, because I couldn't really see them with the drawing that was submitted. Rob, can you tell me what kind of soil volume you're shooting for with the silvicels?
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Say that again.
Can you tell me what soil volume you are shooting for with silvicels?
So we have some overlap, but it's the, oh boy, let me look at the 250 is required or 500 is required per tree. I would have to look back at that, but I know, so the big rectangles you see are the required minimum soil volumes. And then we've had to go long and linear with them, because we talked with water and sewer about what sort of encroachment they would allow for us to get into those easements, which normally it's 0, but because it's existing lines under the sidewalk, and actually the project is going to incur the cost of moving the water line out into Collier Avenue. So water is no longer an issue for us, it's just the sewer. So there is some overlap in the silvicel total volumes.
Okay, so the trees are sharing volume, is what you're saying, which is a good thing.
They will be, yeah, and you can sort of see the overlaps. I can screen share if you want to zoom in on these.
Or Nancy, can you go back up a slide or two slides? Thanks. I don't know if that helps, Rob.
Yeah, so can you zoom in on that, or you're in like a PowerPoint, aren't you?
That's okay. I can see it pretty well. So I have one last question. The species is a columnar carpinus species.
We've got columnar carpinus, and then we've got slender silhouette sweet gum, because these, I mean, essentially the back of the grape will be against the face of the building.
Right.
So we sort of, we're out of the like red maple, and trying to find things that, 1, are going to stay more columnar, and 2, that can handle, corrective pruning to be up against that face of that building.
Are there, do you know this is, I don't know the answer to this question, but do they have grates that are off center so that you can kind of shift the tree forward a little bit from the building, or is that a thing?
City standard doesn't show anything like that.
Oh, okay. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I saw that Mark raised a hand.
Yes, I was interested in what species were to be used, and then I saw the LIQ, so I assumed that was liquid amber. Since it's a suspended sidewalk, I guess I'm not really worried about the sidewalk being heaved. That's not going to be a problem.
All right. Thank you. Perrin?
And I'm just trying to visualize, looking at the photograph of that was provided before the site maps. I'm trying to visualize where on this photograph these cells would go in. And I think what you're proposing, and just tell me if I've got this right, this would be inside of the existing sidewalk and up against the building, right? These aren't going to be planted in the sidewalk, are they?
That's correct, because it's sort of on. It's not common to have the sewer being under the sidewalk. You know, normally it's out in the road. And so on this one, it literally goes almost down the middle of the sidewalk. So these will actually be inside. I think the closest we are to the sidewalk is like 12 foot. Well, let's see, hang on a second. 12 foot 4 inches maybe. So we'll still have the full 10-foot sidewalk clear, I guess, if that's sort of where you were going. We won't be creating trees in that zone.
Okay. So there's going to be a sidewalk on either side of on both Collier and Millard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then, so you've narrowed your building to make space for the trees, is what it sounds like. Or you're using your setbacks to get the trees in there.
Correct. So we just had to squeeze them all the way to the building face.
Right. Okay. All right. And then just so I understand what Ed was asking you about, the green area that's shown on the slide 7, the entire green grid, is that all soil? Is that what you were saying?
That is all the silva cell. So that'll be the below ground structural soil system.
Right. Okay.
So, normally you would have them like a squared 10 by 10. And again, they won't let us bring that structural element out into that easement. I mean, we had to negotiate to get the 4 foot that we did get.
Yeah.
But Kevin, was gracious to work with us on coming up with a solution, because otherwise we were going to be in containers for this.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. That's helpful.
Awesome. You bet.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I have a question for Mark and others. Sweet gums tend to do pretty well as street trees in city trees.
In terms of people posting new content, in terms of people liking content, in terms of people sharing content. Effectively, the platform was getting kind of stale and old and dead. And
I think we have someone. There we go. Thank you so much. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, sweet gums, I think, are pretty good city trees in general. Mark, have you had any problems with gumballs being an issue?
Yes, but my bigger concern with sweet gums has always been them heaving sidewalks. Yeah. And that's why I asked about that earlier, since that's not really a thing here. The gumballs is a lesser concern, but it's still something of a concern in terms of trip and fall, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they tend to go away, kind of.
Is there a variety of Rotunda loba?
This is a seedless variety.
It's okay.
Okay.
That's where I was going next.
No gumballs. All right. Great.
Are there any other questions? The only technical aspect that we're actually voting on is the spacing of these 3 trees here, which is only slightly off of the standard. Because of the use of silva cells, they were able to meet all other standards. So if we're ready, we can have a motion to approve.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Thank you. And roll call vote. Patrick?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Sharon?
Wait, I want to thank Rob for all that work he did to make this happen. Thank you very much.
Hold on, Haley. Sorry, go ahead.
We have not done public comment.
Oh, but on each item. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, we have somebody
Pause
on
the
the
vote.
line. I'm not sure if they want to speak on this item or not, but let me let them in and
Thank
see
you
if.
very much. Sorry about that.
No worries. It's okay. Caller, you are live if you are speaking towards the 50 Collier Avenue.
I'm here for 424 Sunset Drive. Thanks very much.
Okay, we'll be back with you when it's time for that public comment section. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Sorry about that. We will proceed with the vote. We had Patrick and Ed, so we'll jump in with Sharon.
Aye, and thanks to Rob.
Thank you. Steve?
Aye. Looks like a good job to me.
And I know that Cecil joined us. Are you back again, Cecil?
He just left. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. We still have a quorum. Perrin?
Aye.
And Dawn, did you make it in?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Did you have time to review this?
Yes.
Okay. And you vote aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And I also vote aye. All right. So that motion is approved. Thank you, everyone, for your work on that project.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. So we are moving along to 424 Sunset Drive. And this is sort of a non-typical alternative compliance for the UFC. We're going to get some background information from members of the commission who have been working with the homeowners. This is a private residence with steep slope and some grading issues. And so this request is to bring the site into some sort of compliance past the grading issues. So I believe, Sharon, did you want to start with some information on this?
Sure. Nancy, want to, I guess, pull up I don't know, the design or I guess this is what, the only thing we have is the written. We had some soil washout that was happened due to some grading issues on the property. There were unbeknownst to the owners at the time that happened to be done by the contractor. And UFC, I was notified by several neighbors actually that there was an issue up there. I contacted zoning so as to not to trespass on the property to see what was going on. I made a site visit and looked like that there had been from the road a more clearing that was allowed on the that was allowed for them on the previous alternate Board of Adjustments. And then zoning enforcement went up and measured and found that, yes, indeed, there was a fair amount over the allotted from the alternative compliance. I mean, the Board of Adjustments request. So it triggered a alternative compliance remediation. Ricky Hurley at zoning reached out to me because I've been dealing with the neighbors on this issue, and said that Ed and I would be happy to go out and take a look and walk the property with the applicants and homeowners agreement. And we did a site visit and did a written report with what we thought would help the remediation of the soil washout and the tree removal that had happened, and plus with the trees that had died subsequent required of the planning of their steep slope A. That was a roundabout way to say something that had been at least a couple years in the works. So we made a recommendation, and by the looks of things, it looks like the Hummels are in agreement with it, and we submitted it, and here we are. So that's the short version of it. If anybody's got any question, Ed has probably got some more input on this as well, I think.
No, I think you covered it very well, Sharon. Thank you.
All right. I'll give the Hummels opportunity to speak.
Yeah, I want to thank you all for the time and again for helping us to make this correct and make sure we're getting in compliance. And we appreciate Sharon and Ed coming out and making some great recommendations. As you know, new homeowners in Asheville, we're learning, you know, it's different vegetation, different areas. So the species type's been helpful. We've been doing a lot of research. And as you can see by our site plan, we made all the changes they recommended, and a lot have been completed already. They did send us a very nice write-up, I think, with about 11 different recommendations. So they came in on May 20th and did the visit. And then on August 5th, we finally got the suggested plan. At that time, we went into action. We had the large dead poplar removed from behind our porch. The gentleman was a tree service expert. He only knocked down one little, like 6-foot tree next to it. Only the dead tree was removed. He did a great job of laying it down and not injuring any other trees. I myself removed all the dead firs and all the dead white pines that we had planted. Those have been replaced at this point so far with 10 elderberry shrubs. And we used all the recommendations, of course, 6 dog hobbles, and then several allspice. We did not do the Kalmia species yet. We did not do the white oak tree placement yet. They've been ordered and are on order. I did add several tons of rock, actually 4 tons of rock by hand, to bolster both of the stabilizing backs. If anybody ever wants to come and check the backyard out with me, we can slide down the back hill. It is a steep monster, but I did get those stones down there and some up there. And so we've gone the stabilizing efforts there. In the meantime, we've kept the erosion mat. I've done some overseeding just to kind of generally help that area while we're waiting for the remainder of the trees and the Kalmia species to come in for planting. And again, I know we had this initial disagreement with how the measuring was completed. I know that all didn't go as we had thought it would, and that's why we wanted to quickly make amends for this. And again, we do appreciate y'all coming out and helping us with some great suggestions to help stabilize the property. The last thing we did as of last week was we did a whole nother round of stabilizing mulch on the front and sides of the house around the new elderberry plantings and the new fir trees that were planted, and around the new dog hobble as well. We've had no washouts note on the property. Again, I walked it fully the other day, and I actually got to see some of our bear friends while I was out there, and they seem to have a thumbs up for us as well, the work done so far. And we're looking forward to getting those trees in over the next 2 to 3 weeks, and then those bushes hopefully in before Halloween is our goals for getting the remainder of the Kalmia species in.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. Thank you for doing that so quickly. I haven't been up there to take a look. Did you deal with the firs that are too close to the road in the front?
Yeah, we have not. And that's one reason I want to talk with y'all today. They are a little close to the road. They're doing very well. They are on huge root balls. I did try to kind of, they're on the edge where that slope gets very steep. And I kind of was like, oh, I can just knock these back a couple feet. And really, with how steep it is from how we decided to do the front landscape, because again, in front of the house, you had that giant, 24-foot, foot and a half thick retention wall that's holding that portion back. I was scared to try and move or adjust those trees at all because they are huge, and inevitably they were going to tumble down the hill and hit our house. They're doing very well there, and I just didn't have it in me to cut them down at this point because they're beautiful and doing well. And that is one that I honestly have to throw my hands up. I don't know what the best way to go there is.
We should tell them our plan is to keep them that size and to keep them trimmed so that they are not these gigantic obstructions, especially in the street. We would love to keep them that size.
But I'm gonna let Ed respond to that.
Yeah, my response is more in the form of a question to Rick Hurley, and the question is, Rick, can you live with what they're saying with these trees if they keep them managed? Rick,
I'm sorry, that was somebody was talking to me over here.
That always happens when someone asks a question. Do you want me to ask the question again?
Would you please, Ed?
Yeah, no problem. My question is, can you live with the fir trees being as close to the road as they are, given the fact that the homeowners said that they plan to manage their size?
I think that's fine for the zoning perspective. Maybe Mr. Foster, if he's still on, if there's a concern about them impacting our trash trucks or something going up and down the road, as obviously when they go up, they're going to grow out as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I did do my first trimmings on those trees just to work on keeping their height and size intact. Again, looking for about 8 to 10 foot on those there where they wouldn't be in the roadway at all. So again, I'm going to keep those groomed. And if you've been by the property, I'm very meticulous about maintaining our yard. Our house in Wake Forest, where we reside the other part of the time, we've been in the town's kind of garden club tour for a bunch of years because I'm a meticulous homeowner, and it means a lot that the house looks nice and that we're doing everything correctly. So I would love to keep those trees, and I will keep those maintained. And if they have to go, then I will shed a tear, but they will make indoor Christmas trees for a lot of people.
Right. We do definitely need 2 usable lanes in the road there. So that would be the city's expectation.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. Having been in the landscape business forever, what species are those? Because you're going to have a terrible time keeping those contained with as close to the road as they are. Do we know what species you've got?
Those are Douglas firs.
So we've got the standard height of a Douglas fir of, I don't know how you're going to keep them back unless you shear them as Christmas trees every 6 months. I don't know how you would keep those back off the road. They're within 4 feet of the road there.
Yeah. I mean, if you see where they're at now, Sharon, they look very nice, and I was going to kind of keep them miniaturized and in that form. I mean, I feel like very capable of doing that. I can access them very easily in my state of current good health. And if something happens to me, I can hire a landscaper. And they're very nice sized trees. They present very well from the road, and I can absolutely keep them off the road. If that's what the town would like, I can absolutely do that. And again, they look very nice, and they're they're doing very well. They've been planted over a year now. I put those in September 9th of 2020. And so we got a year track record on all those replaced trees, and they look just so super good. And I will keep them trimmed if you give me the opportunity.
All right. Can we, Nancy, go back to I believe it was the first or second slide that had the actual list of recommendations? There we go. So I believe that this is what we would be, I guess, voting to approve as a the actual request.
We also had the trees close to the road to be removed. That was in the recommendation. And I'd like to finish at Amy, if you don't mind, that conversation with Ed. Ed, can those be sheared?
Yeah, I'm not sure they're Douglas fir. They're probably Fraser fir.
Yes, I think.
Douglas fir is a Western species, so and they can be sheared. And the thing is, if they start getting tall, which is not as much a problem, you can start raising the lower branches.
Right.
So in time, if the trees are managed correctly, we can maintain the trees and still have clearance with the road. It's just incumbent upon the homeowner to maintain the trees so that we have that clearance. Mm-hmm. And I'm inclined to, it sounds like the city is, sort of in the same boat. They're just concerned about clearance. Mm-hmm. I think we're really more about trying to keep vegetation on steep slope areas rather than removing them. So, we could always recircle if there's a problem with the trees in the road, like we would with anybody else.
I agree. I thought they looked great. I just was concerned, as the city was concerned, with being 4 feet from the road, but not being an arborist. I wasn't sure whether they could be kept contained, but by hearing things, they can. So
I don't picture them. I don't picture them being contained. Ultimately, they're going to have to be able to mature, as the kind of trees that they are based on their genetics. So limbing up the trees, removing tree limbs back to the trunk face, and accepting that the trees are going to become trees and can't necessarily be kept as a screen indefinitely.
Right.
You know, there are too many places around town where white pines or hemlocks or whatever were used as a hedge many moons ago. And at some point, somebody lost interest in that, and the tree became what it is, you know. And so I don't see it being something you can keep pruned indefinitely. If nothing else, eventually there's going to be another owner of the property, and their maintenance habits might be different than yours.
Right. They'll get tall, and you know, you'll be pruning the lower limbs, and they'll look like trees after a while. And there's nothing you can do about that. Mark's right. But there's a point where the limbs will be elevated high enough to allow clearance from trucks and cars, both lanes. So it's just going to take some mindful maintenance for several years.
We're prepared to do that. I would like to bring something to the city's attention, or maybe the commission's attention. It just seems to be a lack of communication, or maybe a miscommunication, in that when we received the plan that Ed and Sharon wrote up, which was very specific and very helpful to us, we, a week and a half later, immediately, as soon as we could get back to Asheville, sprung into action to execute that plan. And in doing so, the very first thing on the agenda was to remove some of the dead trees that were there. A week after we did that, we got a citation from the city for removing a dead tree. So I am confused by that. That seems we're doing the best to execute the plan, and yet we receive a citation for executing on the plan that was given to us. So if someone could explain that or help me understand that, I think that would be helpful to me as a homeowner.
The citation was related to, this is Ricky here speaking, it's related to the notice of violation was sent back in November, actually, last year. And obviously we had kind of held off, you know, when we had just made discussions with I think your prior architect and your contractor about the variance request in December, and we started in earnest on the variance and worked in through midwinter to get to eventually got to the Board of Adjustment in March. And obviously at that meeting, we had the decision that the variance request to enlarge in or make a little bit larger area of disturbance allowed was denied. And at that meeting, instead of as we talked, we instead of y'all going immediately to an alternative compliance, you know, I spoke to a couple members, and Ms. Summerall and Mr. Macy were agreeable to work with y'all to visit the site. And so we just allowed some time for the commission members to coordinate with y'all and to visit the site. And so obviously it took a little bit of time to get that coordinated, to get a plan drawn. And then the plan was was emailed, and then that's when my communication with y'all, we discovered that y'all didn't receive it. I guess it may have went somewhere else, and I forwarded a copy to y'all, I think at the very end of July or very 1st of August.
It was August 5th. Yeah, it was August 5th.
Okay.
And we executed on the plan 10 days later. It seems unreasonable that we would be punished for such a quick reaction to a plan that we never received.
It's a pretty hefty plan. I mean, there's a lot to do on there. We've done more than half. For sure.
Well,
we've worked very quickly.
Yeah, it wasn't the fact that you didn't execute on the plan. It was that we needed to get y'all to this meeting here so that we could get this, because, you know, obviously Mrs. Summerall and Mr. Macy were working as kind of representative of the group, but to basically help kind of bring closure to the violation and get a plan, quote, quote, approved, to basically be an approved remediation. We needed this commission, this body, to kind of give a thumbs up for that. So that was hence the application.
So the citation was given to us to get us to the meeting?
It was because there had not been any action towards applying for this meeting. And so obviously I wasn't involved with that. So any additional removal was just appears to, you know, we got a report. We actually had some neighbors seeing additional removal and concerned, and they reached back out to our enforcement staff, and that's how we became aware of it. Was there was more removal, so there was concern that, you know, nobody else is party to this discussion, and so
I see.
I-
So there was
so that's
a removal because the plan was given to us.
Yep.
But the plan wasn't yet approved. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay,
So
understood.
yeah. And so once you have made the application for this meeting, we've kind of, stopped the fines accruing at that point. So hopefully we'll have resolution today, and then we'll get y'all started. And once we get kind of all the work completed, we can talk about the accrued citation. So once we get that kind of buttoned up, we can come back later to me.
Okay.
And if I could clarify something, the enforcement side is separate from what we do at the UFC. And this sort of work is very uncommon for us, as far as making the plan, approving plans, things like that. The original plan with Ed and Sharon going out was just volunteer work. It wasn't actually anything formal as far as being through any sort of compliance. So that's why those things overlapped, because they were separate.
It explains the
sense.
miscommunication and the.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's helpful.
The separate branches that just ended up coming
Gotcha.
together.
Okay.
So
Thank
that
you
helps.
for clarifying.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that.
And so then this point here, and we can continue discussion and questions if there are any, is to then have a plan in place so that your enforcement side can be wrapped up, again, separate from the commission. We're just
Gotcha.
serving as the help, the technical help with the plan, if that makes
Got it.
sense. So, okay. Any other questions or comments from the commission members for this plan?
Well, if we're moving to approval, I think we do actually need some discussion of the terms that were just on the screen on that last slide. Amy, you had started to suggest that we look at this variance. We're here to approve a variance. Is that correct?
No, we're here to approve a plan.
A plan. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So and the plan is not this slide. It's the following slide.
Yeah,
right?
this is the write-up. The plan, I believe, is just what's in that drawing,
Right.
the UFC recommendations. This is a summary of what that plan is. And again, this is atypical for the work we do. We don't have a lot of guidance. So that's why it's sort of, here we go, But we can definitely ask questions, clean this up if need be, make it, if there's a point of clarity.
Well, as someone who knows less about this because I haven't visited the site, I could start asking questions blindly, but I know that Ed and Sharon have so much experience with this plan that it probably will go faster if you all want to summarize your thoughts about where the plan is right now and if it's acceptable to you.
So that was for Ed and Sharon, if you.
Yeah, I think that we're making very good progress. I think the plan obviously addresses the issue, and the homeowners are making good progress towards fulfilling what we outlined in the plan. So I'm inclined to encourage approval with the condition that those FERs be maintained as stated, and it's just time to move on with this.
And also, we've had an additional report of a tree being removed. I got a call from another neighbor that there was a arborist, or not an arborist, the guy in a chainsaw.
No. He's a licensed arborist. He's licensed arborist. He is not a guy with a chainsaw. It's very important that that's understood.
Let me finish.
Okay.
Because you're in a zone where any trees that need to be removed need to have a permit at the on the steep slope requirement. Now I understand because I live in a steep slope highest also, and it's a pain in the neck for me to have to get an arborist out to pull a permit to take a dead tree down. But they've got to, with the condition, authorize that this tree is dead. I completely believe you. But with the amount of soil washout, and it's been a 2-year process, and most of the neighbors don't know what's going on. And then when they went out to talk to this gentleman, whomever he was, and I believe you when you say he was an arborist, he just turned around and said, I'm cutting down a tree. And he didn't have any name on his truck. I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying that if you're going to remove any trees on this property because they're dead and you need to bring an arborist out, then I'm suggesting you follow the letter of what you need to do this so that everybody's comfortable with what's going on out there. And that's just to protect all of us getting phone calls and us responding back to you and then letting the neighbors going on and me having to contact zoning to find out if it was an appropriate removal. And I'm just suggesting, and I believe you that he was a licensed arborist, but there is regulations on steep slope on removing trees.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Sharon, we were going off of the plan that said remove that dead poplar, so we thought that was the permission to move forward with that removal of that particular.
Yeah, I understand the confusion.
It was a total miscommunication, and I will never remove another tree that's not.
Well, now that you know
I got no plans on taking anybody out at this point, right?
Yeah, and now that I know you're implementing the plan, because I did not know that, then if I get a phone call, I can say the plan is being implemented and go out and check and make sure that's the case.
Perfect.
But I hadn't been following that you were implementing it. So, and I appreciate you following through on this, and thank you.
Yeah, and again, we apologize, as this is our first time dealing with this. We had no idea of some of the complexities, and we just saw the plan and said, "Oh, let's get acting on the plan," because we're the kind of folks that get stuff done, and that's why we're getting things done. And so we just were acting in good faith to show you all that we are trying to do the right thing for the property and for the city and for the house.
Right. Yes. Thank you very much.
We're more than happy to do it. And it's funny because we talked with the architect. He said, they're going to penalize by planting some trees. I'm like, I don't see that as a penalty. We're happy to plant trees. I mean, I like trees as much as y'all maybe like trees, or maybe not that much, but if you saw my house at home, we have a beautiful landscape yard, and we're going to have the same plan for moving forward here at 424 Sunset.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Anything else from the commission members right now? Go ahead, Perrin.
Yeah, question for the Hurleys. So looking at, I think that maybe you drew this map, and I'm having a hard time telling the difference between the erosion symbol and the seeded grass symbol. So I think your erosion areas are these two, these two hatched sort of.
Those are actually the rock gardens. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, those are the rock gardens. This is a rock garden. That's a rock garden. It was seeded here, and I actually had it reseeded. I actually reseeded it myself 2 weeks ago because that rye had died off clearly, just to help stabilize it again while the commune was put in. These are those erosion baffles that are still held in by the rebar, which I've almost pierced my organs about 9 times stumbling down the hill. But I'm dead set to leave that rebar in until those erosion baffles go away, and then I will pull those to finish things up. But I didn't want to move anything because everything is just sitting beautifully where the good Lord is letting it kind of grow again.
Mm-hmm.
And so where are the erosion areas and the grass seeded areas?
Yeah, the entire area behind the house, really the entire distance of the house down to the first natural tree line where the clearing stopped for the actual building of the house, all the way down the utility channel was initially seeded. I did not reseed down the utility channel because it's doing pretty good. I did do up kind of high by the house where it's a little thinner and dead. We'll see how that's going to play. It's been real dry lately, unfortunately. I think my seed timing wasn't great, but we're going to be coming up tomorrow. And again, I'm supposed to be getting some more of those commune shrubs in, and then I'll get those trees in eventually. They're on a little bit of back order, but.
And then, so where are the erosion? I can't tell what it says. It says erosion roadside, that first symbol in your legend.
Yeah, so those are the erosion boulder gardens.
Boulder gardens.
A third one, yep. So there's an area here and then an area across, and I added a little third one actually right here with some of the extra stone that I had. And then those are those kind of rolled hay baffles. I call them erosion baffles that are in with the rebar stakes. There's multiple levels of those, and it's grassed from there up to the back of the house.
Okay.
And then the work that I did complete so far was I planted all of these elderberries here and dog hobbles on both sides. I put in a few more rocks in the front, and then we had everything re-mulched. That was the third time we've actually had the property mulch. We went with very big mulch first, like prime cut mulch to hold bigger pieces, almost like little logs. And they went with finer. And this time they put on kind of a finish mulch to try to get it all to layer in and kind of take some hold there. And that was just completed 2 days ago to the back corners of the house.
Okay, and I guess the landslide, the area where the landslide was, isn't shown on this map, correct?
Apparent it is. That the old cutback road is actually goes through right where these little boulder gardens are, and you can tell when you walk down there, it's kind of steep and it levels off, and then there's the flat cut. Again, that was graded once by the former property owners, and then again when we had first purchased the property, and so that's where there's 3 24-inch grates with 18-inch perforated pipe that actually run all the way down to Macon. That are managing the water that's on that level.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions, commission or staff? As I know we have a caller, so I was going to go ahead and go to the public comment if there's nothing else. All right, Haley, you want to help me out? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, let me let them in. Okay, caller.
Hey, thanks. I'm here. Good afternoon. My name is Jake Quinn, and I live at 428 Sunset Drive, immediately next door to the subject property. And I thank y'all for this opportunity to offer my testimony. Good development occurs when property owners respect local ordinances when they undertake to develop their property. Good development occurs when general contractors are knowledgeable about development rules and constraints and abide by them. Good development occurs when the city takes seriously the laws that have been passed governing development. Alas, this is the case for all three players, owners, general contractor, and the city, having, at least to some extent, failed their responsibilities. Steve Williams was the general contractor on this project. He regularly ignored city ordinances during the 2+ years this project occurred. So when additional unauthorized land clearing began after the exterior of that new house was finished about a year ago, I have to admit I was not all that surprised. Over the course of this project, none of my complaints to the city about the assorted deficiency of the general contractor were fully investigated or satisfactorily addressed. I brought the unauthorized land clearing to the city's attention the day it began, but the case was closed without serious investigation. When I followed up a month later, that case was also closed without investigation. When the city of Asheville relies on complaint-based enforcement, but fails to follow up on complaints in any timely or meaningful way, we end up in hearings like this. I thank one of my neighbors for getting this case before the Urban Forestry Commission. Now, I had pretty much figured that these violations were driven by the general contractor, but recent events have suggested that the non-resident property owners might share some culpability. Shortly after 9 a.m. on Sunday, August 15th, less than 2 months ago, and many months after this controversy started, 2 men went onto the property of 424 Sunset Drive and cut down and removed healthy trees, including at least one oak. 9 a.m. Excuse me, I'm testifying.
Yes, you are.
9 a.m. on a Sunday, and I have photos if you want to see them. So now we're trying to close the barn door after the livestock have escaped. As far as I'm concerned, all three of the major actors in this have been irresponsible. But in the end, the burden must fall on the property owners, for they are responsible for what happens on their property. And I urge you to stick with the plans you have developed to make sure that this property, that the damage done to this property is fixed as much as possible. And with respect to those trees next to the street, I urge you all to be realistic about it. And let's take action now to prevent problems down in the future. Thanks very much for your time and attention. I do appreciate it. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you, caller. I'll take a moment there. We appreciate the comments. And as far as trees and enforcement, this commission is aware that there are issues, throughout the city with enforcing landscape plans and development, and we're working our part to address that. I know that these homeowners, you'll have to be neighbors with your neighbors. So it sounds to me personally like you are trying to improve your property from this point forward. I can't speak to the past infractions. If you want to take any time, otherwise we can move on for last minute questions and a vote on the recommendations. All right. Any other comments or questions from the commission?
It does seem like these street side trees are a problem in the making. So I just, I ultimately defer to Ed and Sharon about that, but it seems like we're going to end up with a really different situation in a handful of years from now than we have today, and it's going to run away from property owners. So at one point or another. So, the meristem grows from the top of the tree, and that's unavoidable. So, that's I just want to flag that before we try to move to a conclusion, because it's nice to think that we can change the growth habit of a tree, but we just can't.
Understood. I see a hands up. It seems to me with the street tree question with the firs, we have two questions or problems. Do you leave it now because they're holding up the soil and address it in the future if it becomes a problem? Or do we ask them to take that out now when we're still trying to remediate the site, when these trees are there trying to hold the land in? It seems to me like it might be a better current situation to leave those trees for the moment, but obviously open for further debate. So I saw Cecil and Ed. Cecil, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sorry I've been in and out of this meeting. I've been having a computer problem here. But regarding Jake Quinn's objections that he raised, I've got to say there is no more demanding argument for having an urban forester than the entire lack of enforcement that we've had. I mean, y'all have known that in my neighborhood here, across my street and up the hill, an absolute violation of the steep slope and all that. And I argued that through the tree commission here and the urban forestry commission. And what it ended up was the city finally went and spoke to my neighbor. That was the enforcement. They said, "Oh, you didn't do it right." There was no fine. There were no $10,000 fines for people. There is nothing going on with Jake's neighbor right now about this that is enforcing. There's no enforcement. And to me, the lack of enforcement is why we absolutely need an urban forester who will take over that function. I've been on this commission 8 years on council, and now 2.5 years or something as actually a member here. And it's like stupid. It's like totally stupid. We have all these great ideas and nothing happens. Nothing happens. So anyway, that's where I am.
Thank you, Cecil. Ed?
Yeah, regarding those fir trees, it's a bit of a dilemma because we're trying to encourage vegetation to stabilize the slopes, and at the same time, we're removing vegetation because it might potentially conflict with something in the future. And from an old forester's perspective, it's always a good idea if something's established to leave it until other things get established, and then you can make a decision whether or not to remove it down the road. And those trees aren't very big, and they'll be easy to remove 3 years from now. There's a lot of other instances in this town that I can point my finger to where there's conflict between vegetation and roads and signage, my own neighborhood included. You can't see the stop signs because of the trees that are growing on the street side. So I'm inclined to say, let's let things get established. We have new plant material coming in. If these trees become a problem, we can address them 2 or 3 years down the road.
All right, thank you, Ed. I saw the Hummels had their hand up next.
I just wanted to say that I am obviously with Ed's position in that these trees have established roots in them, and they are really stabilizing one potential area of erosion. And so I would just welcome the members to come and take a look at what we're talking about before they would offer up a vote to get rid of these trees that we're trying to establish and try to, with the hopes of stabilizing the property. That is our whole focus of executing on the plan that was delivered. And my also is my hope that Mr. Quinn is our neighbor and that he could have a friendly conversation with us moving forward to.
Thank you. Mark.
Well, I thought Ed did a fantastic job of pointing out how there are already so many situations around the city where trees are overgrown and they're beyond what our existing resources can manage. To me, that doesn't seem like an argument for keeping the trees. It seems like an argument for going ahead and cutting them while they're small. But whatever. I have one tree crew for the entire city. So that's why things are the way they are. And so taking care of things where they're small seems like the most efficacious way to fix a problem that we know will happen.
It's a good point. Thank you. All right, Perrin.
I'd actually like to hear from Sharon before I speak, please.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Sharon.
All right. The trees have been in a year and they were B&B balled and burlapped. And so for me, that's not established. They'll have some feeder roots, but not a lot. And I think the problem is that you can get a small skid steer out there and you can move them back now and then possibly use some lawn mat to hold down those areas and just move them back further on the property. You could probably even, not knowing how big the B&B was, you can probably even scoot them on either side and not damage the trees. And a little bit of excavation you're going to do with the skid steer can be dealt with matting. And I would like to see those moved because I'm agreeing with Mark that they're going to be a potential problem. And I see one tree, I remember one tree in the area that's on a slope. And the other ones are sitting right up in front of the house, which is flat. So, and I really don't, other than a cost burden, I don't see the burden on the trees because they're only a year.
All right. Perrin, did you still have this?
Yes, please. So I'm sensitive to the concerns about erosion and I appreciate all the planting that's been done here to deal with erosion. I'm also, I also appreciate your aesthetic concerns. I'm speaking to the Hummels now about, the type of vegetation you'd like to have in front of your property. So in terms of accounting for the erosion control benefits of that, of those trees and accounting for these potential conflicts with the roadway, what about an interplanting plan? So in other words, replacement, manageable replacement shrubs could be interplanted between your existing fir trees. Saplings, small little guys, time to get established. And then, 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, whatever the appropriate amount of time is, once those are well established and well rooted into the ground, the firs could be moved or cut or whatever the case may be in order to make sure that soil is being held in place. That was my idea. It's a way to go without bare ground at any time, at any point in time. And it's also a way that we could make this decision now and finalize the plan and not have to revisit that particular issue in 3 or 4 years. So that's my idea. That's my suggestion for dealing with that. I hear what you're saying, Sharon, that there's a way to do it without creating a major erosion event, to actually move the trees now so that they do have adequate clearance their way.
Well,
and maybe
the problem with that, Perrin, is that it's a small area width-wise. So if you get any equipment in there to move it, you're going to destroy everything you've done on top of it. So it's not very wide at all. So if they have to come out and that's how we vote, we can't have planting around it because we'll just destroy all the planting trying to get those out because it is not very wide.
It could be cut though, right? The firs could be cut at the end of whatever the waiting period is for this.
Well, they could be they could be chainsawed out. But you're still going to have damage because it's very narrow. You're still going to have damage to anything you're planting around it. Some of it will come back, and yeah, it depends on how dense you plant it, but it's very narrow. So you're going to have whatever you plant in there, you're going to have damage.
Okay.
You know, apparent and share my one concern is that steep slope is the front right behind those trees is so steep. There's no way to plant those trees in the ground unless they're angled back and poking our house. There is no purchase to move those trees back on that hill at all because there is no soil there because of the intense steepness of that slope, which is why I went to the boulders and to that 3-layer mulch to kind of hold things back.
Right in that one corner. In that one corner. The rest of it is fairly level. You've got that one corner that's problematic.
And again, it may be worth coming out to see the site. I can just tell you, I tried to put the trees back as far as they could before they could no longer be supported by the earth behind it, because it drops off, Sharon, very, very steeply for 3 of those 4 trees. And I love the idea of moving them back. I just know how kind of gravity and physics works, and there's no way that those trees can move back just because I'm tending them every weekend and I'm watering them and I'm mulching around, and there is no earth for them to go back. They would literally be buried, they'd have to be buried up to their tips to have any soil purchased there because of the steepness of the slope, which is what my main concern is.
Yeah, my misnomer is back. It's to the other side of the property that's flatter and other areas where they can go. So my misplace is moving back.
I'm sorry. I thought you meant like move them down, like back 6 feet or 8 feet. And I mean,
yeah, no, you don't have the room to do that. They'd have to go down in the back somewhere. But I'm torn either way. I'm torn with Ed, and I'm torn with the physical restraints, and I know where it's going to go. It's going to be a burden on the city. I can see it in the future, but I'm torn with Ed as a person that doesn't like to remove trees to keep things there. So I am. At this point in time, I don't know.
and Sharon, I'm gonna off one last thing. They're 400-pound root balls. They took 3 of us to literally slide them into position. There's a lot of stabilizing earth around that tree. I mean, if you want me to sign a prenup that I'll cut them down in 3 years, I just hate the idea of losing all of that mass. There's a lot of mass holding a lot up there, and that was part of our initial plan before the city was involved. When I went through this with multiple landscape architects, and part of it was get some trees with gigantic root balls there and put them in and, hold as much of that road up as you can. And so I do see there's these 2 sides. And I mean, I totally understand why this is a dilemma. I just, having walked the property and I've lived there for a year now, I'm personally very concerned if those trees come out that road's going to crumble right behind it. Because you saw what happened down the road a little bit.
That's kind of my concern too. I mean, and this is one case where I'd rather let ecology prevail over some potential future inconvenience. I think there's a greater risk from removing those trees than there is leaving them at this point. That's just my opinion after seeing it.
Yeah, and I also can see that we can plant on top of it and stabilize the top and not have that. You've also got berms and curbing up there, but I'm more leaning towards Ed's philosophy than the landscaper in me and the future seeing. So I am leaning more towards Ed.
All right, then. I think we're getting close. I don't want to cut it off prematurely, but it sounds to me like we might be in a position to make a recommendation, perhaps with some sort of caveat about the maintenance of the trees that are at the street. I don't know if somebody wants to take a stab at it.
Well, I would hope so, but what I'm hearing here is arguments against what the whole point of our work is. So we're hearing that, oh well, this would not work. This would not work. This would. Well, of course it would not work, because of the reasons why we have the steep slope ordinance and so forth. I mean, so we have an applicant battling against physical reality, and anyway, it appalls me that people keep going, oh yeah, but if we just did, oh, but this a little bit too steep. Anyway, I keep getting blown away by this stuff, especially when my neighbor, bulldozed his property and then it all ran down on mine.
Understood. Thanks, Cecil. Okay, Shelley.
I just want to remind everyone that we, again, have taken the plan, which was, again, done by Ed and Sharon on their own volunteer time. And we appreciate it because it helps us, neither one of us. I mean, Joe's kind of a landscaper because he's out there way more than me, but we are implementing it to the full extent. And I want that point to be known. With all of the details and all of the back and forth that's happening, this whole alternative compliance meeting is about us remediating the situation. And we've taken a plan by the UFC and we are implementing it.
Yeah, and if Mr. Bothwell or Mr. DeJong like to come out and walk the property and see what we're up to, I would be more than happy to walk them and show them what we're doing to try to make it better. I mean, we would be the worst impacted if our steep slope went down, right? I mean, let's be honest about this. If our house goes sliding down the hill, I think we would suffer more than most others. And it's very important that we get along with the town. We are now officially tax-paying citizens, and you guys gave us a good tax bill on the house, and we're happily paying that. And we want the town to be nice. We want to add to it. And, we're doing what the UFC is asking us to do, and we're doing it happily. There's no begrudging what you're all trying to do. It was never our intent to get to this spot in the first place. It was a calculation issue, it seems like, from the engineer and the measures, and that has nothing to do with me. But we want to make everything right to our best. And again, we appreciate Sharon and Ed weighing in on this because I think their approach is doable and it's cost effective. And I think it's going to stabilize a property for years to come and also look real nice. And that's all we can say.
All right, Ed.
Yeah, there are two separate issues here. One is whether or not we approve the plan or not, and I'm inclined to make a motion that we do. The second is the issue related to the fir trees, and I think that's a decision we can defer for a while and until we see what happens out there. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the plan as prepared by Sharon and I, and that we defer our decision on the fir trees until a later date to see how well they're maintained and whether or not they become a problem.
I second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? I see some hands up. Mark or Cecil, if you guys still have comments, go ahead.
I do. Per chapter 20, are the trees along the road within the street right of way? And if so, are they not within the jurisdiction of the Public Works Department?
Good question.
I'm not aware of a permit that was issued by us for planting the trees there.
I'm not aware of how close they are. I don't know if Ed or Sharon can shed light on that.
What's the,
If they're shown on this plan accurately, they're just outside of the right of way.
If they're that close to the road, that would be very surprising. But ultimately, we'd need to see some property corners up front. No, but I think Sunset has like a 40-foot street right of way or something.
is that what it is?
I could look that up for you if you like, if you want me to take the time. Either way, to me, you have the two separate issues, the site plan, which is the private property, and you have the trees perched on the edge of the road, potentially in the right of way. Those are two separate situations governed by two separate city agencies. So I just wanted to be clear on that while you were taking your vote.
So,
That's true.
so given that, then we vote on the plan and let the city deal with the trees.
Yeah.
Well, they might be out of our scope either way.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Yep.
and our
So-
motion, I don't think needs to be amended because that's what you said. Is we're taking a vote on the entire plan aside from those trees that might be too
Correct.
close to the road.
Correct.
Okay, so we can continue with that. Any other discussion on that motion? All right, then we will vote. Patrick,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Cecil,
Aye.
Perrin,
Aye.
Dawn,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So the motion passes, and I want to thank you very much to the Hummels and to the city staff and Ed and Sharon, everyone who worked on this project. We'll keep an eye on it, and as a commission, we are available for questions in the future, and we'll continue to work with Mark as well on the street tree potential issue. So appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much for your time, and Ed and Sharon specifically for volunteering.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if anybody would like to come back and walk the property and see what we've done, we'd be more than happy to have you all come over and have you in for an iced tea.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you
Okay,
for your time.
blessings. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And we know, and this actually brings up somewhat of a separate point, but we know that these issues on steep slope, they do come up. And so one piece of potential ordinance revisions, we probably want to continue to take a look at how these are handled, both from the UFC and from the city and enforcement side. All right, next on the agenda is general public comment. I don't know, Haley, do we have anyone left? Nope. Okay. So then staff reports. Mark, we got your report. I don't know if you want to highlight anything there.
If the commission has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right. Mark notes that he went to the North Carolina Urban Forest Council's Great North Carolina Tree Conference. I was also in attendance. It was really, really great. A lot of information, bits and pieces that I think will tie in to the work we're doing here. It was really fantastic. And obviously he is short-staffed, as he pointed out already. So if anyone knows any potential arborists needing jobs, you can send them that
Amy?
way. Yeah, go ahead.
If I may ask a question, Mark, you last month you gave us a really helpful update about how many trees were lost and how many trees were planted in the city. I don't know if you keep a running tally of that or if that's more storm related when you run around and tally how many trees fell in the city. But that's, if you have those numbers handy, I'd love to hear them for the last month.
No, I have a few different Google Sheets up on the computer anticipating questions that might have come up, and that wasn't one of them.
Okay. That's all right. I would just say
those are entirely separate Google Sheets where I tally up storm losses and, understand that the trees that come down in the storms primarily fall out of the woods. Some of them are perched right on the edge of roads and fall either downhill onto people's property or oftentimes just into more woods, which is nice. So they don't land in somebody's house. And then planting records, yes, I keep those on an annual basis. Our planting numbers fluctuate according to the year. I think we were, well, now if you want, I can go to the right page. Let's see. 2021 plantings, we had We put in 48 trees in the Public Works Department last year. And of course, the Parks Department also plants trees. So mine are not completely inclusive of the full city's numbers.
So am I correct in understanding that when you gave us that update last time about how many trees had fallen, that was the tally you did because of the storm, and that you
exactly. Yes,
you're not just going around.
You're
not counting every single tree that falls every month or anything like that out in the middle.
No. Fred was a fairly memorable event, and so we had a lot of trees that came down with that. And so no, it's not a head count, if you will, of every tree that comes down in the city or anything.
Okay, and the 48 trees you said that were planted, that was for the year 2021? Is that what you said?
That was this spring, yes.
This spring, okay. All right. Thanks. Well, generally speaking, I'll always be curious about those numbers. So, when you're pulling up your spreadsheets for meetings, whenever that data is available, I'd love to get updates on that, please.
Sure.
All right, thank you. Next, DSD provided a report in a very nice table, thanks Nancy, on the tree protection ordinance. We can see canopy planted and preserved based on number of projects and where fee and lieu money has been collected. So are there any questions for Nancy on that data? You can see in the agenda there. All right, thank you for that. Keep that coming. Anybody else? Okay, moving on to old business. So first up, we have the UDO landscaping standards revisions. Ed, I have you on there. Where are we at with, or if Fadila wants to talk about that?
Yeah, Fadila's on. I'd like to invite him to give us an update. We met earlier, late last week, and discussed a few things related to third-party inspection and soil volume standards and a few other things. But Fadila can give us some of the details.
Sure, I'll start with just a broad overview, and then you can ask if you have any details so I don't ramble on. I think the general direction is this is a spin-off group from the Open Space Task Force that is looking at reworking the entire landscape code of the UDO. Our goal is to bring something to P&Z in December so the council can take a look in January. There are lots of changes we're proposing. I think some of the biggest ones that have the potential for most impact for the benefit of the city include, one, moving to requirements for minimum uncompacted soil volume requirements for trees. That is something that few cities have, and I think the cities that have them don't do a very good job. They may have it on the books, but they actually don't have a process to ensure that it's done well. So a second part of the benefits that we are going to roll out include third-party inspection, which will not guarantee, we can't guarantee anything, but it will help to ensure that these trees in projects are planted according to our specs, and the process will require that a project hires a licensed arborist or registered landscape architect that would be part of the project and would have at least 3 inspections: pre-construction, in the middle when you are preparing the plantings and planting them, and then a final inspection. And we've never had that before. That's why you can have the best designs and they're planted and you wonder why things don't grow well. Well, it's because we get a fly-by-night landscape contractor who digs a 2-foot hole in the ground, puts a tree in, and it doesn't die, at least for 5 years, but it doesn't really grow. So I'd say the 2 biggest things in these changes will be third-party inspection, minimum soil volume, minimum uncompacted soil volume standards, and then we're going through every bit of the landscape code and trying to see what doesn't quite work, what needs to be changed, both through DSD's experience and through this commission or this task force. Hopefully we should try to push to get it done as soon as we can so that we can then bring it through a larger review that includes development, engineering, design review, and so forth.
Right, that's good. Thanks. A couple other things. We had a discussion last week about involving alternative compliance discussions with some adaptive uses to sites where soil volumes may not be met because of existing site constraints. So some of the change of the code and the seriousness with respect to soil volume that the group is taking will bring in the Urban Forestry Commission in an alternative compliance if these standards can't be met. One thing we haven't talked about, Vidila, and I think we should add to our discussion is standards and specs related to the quality of plant material, which is also a problem that I'm seeing with newly planted trees on our streets. And that should be a pretty easy issue to raise because there are ANSI standards for plant material selection that we can incorporate into this code.
Yeah, we can do that. And one other thing I just want to highlight, because it's another agenda item of yours, is that this is coming out of the Open Space Task Force, which you guys have been a big part of. And I just want to remind you as you look at open space and might revise your recommendation for how we're moving forward in that, because this is going to have probably more overarching impacts to the city than I think that will.
Right. Well, specifically, the discussion was regarding the waiver of open space requirements for the Central Business District. And our position was, well, if we're not going to require open space in the Central Business District, let's at least make sure our trees grow when we plant them. And to do that, we have to look at our standards and specs and inspections and things like that.
That's right. And so this started as basically a Central Business Zoning District review. And then with the task force requests, we expanded it and it became a citywide review. So pretty powerful tangent move from the Open Space Task Force that will have big impacts.
All right.
That's all we have, Amy.
Thank you. Any questions for Vidila or Ed on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Cecil.
Yeah. The thing I keep returning to is enforcement. We come up with all these rules, all these ideas that this should happen and that should happen, and there's no reliable enforcement of these rules. Never.
You're right.
Never are there reliable enforcements.
You're right, and that's a point that we raised earlier on, and the city came back with this suggestion for a third-party inspection requirement, and Vidila has started putting together the documents that would be used for the third-party inspection, and just last week we moved away from using landscape contractors, from being eligible to do those inspections, because that's like the fox guarding the hen house. To using registered landscape architects or certified arborists. So they're independent third parties. And, I'm kind of optimistic, given that the city doesn't have their own resources to do this, I think it's a good solution, and we'll just see how it goes. If it doesn't work, we'll look for something else.
Vidila, did you want to add to that? I saw that your link.
Yeah, I'm just typing in a couple of things here so you can take a look of just what we're doing. Just FYI, this isn't required, but these are some of the ideas of the certificates that will be required as part of the process. And you're right, Cecil. The biggest lesson from all of this is that we need to have a way to ensure that what is on the books happens on the ground. And that's the point of third-party inspection. At least today, we don't have inspection guarantee. Tomorrow, we will. And aside from the requirement of the inspection, if somebody doesn't do it, we can charge them $100 a day for failure to comply. And we'll see how it goes, like Ed said.
And, one last comment, and at the risk of sounding like a broken record, this speaks again to the critical and urgent need for an urban forester on staff to help us follow through with this kind of stuff. So,
thank you. Patrick?
Yes. At one time when this task force first started discussing the idea of a third-party inspection, I know that Sharon raised some concerns about third-party inspections, and I would just like to ask her if she's now comfortable with what's being proposed in that area.
Yes, I am. But it's kind of like our tree protection, our tree canopy protection. We know what's falling through the cracks by working with it. And, but I think Videla's worked out, and the task force, we have worked out a way that it seems a little more foolproof than it did in the beginning.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you for the update and everyone who's working on the landscape standards revisions. Next, we have the Urban Forest Master Plan. I was just going to ask
Amy?
Dawn. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I got my hand up and everything.
Oh, I missed it. Sorry, Mark. You're way over there on my screen. I apologize. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem. I just wanted to mention, as somebody who has gone through the budget process annually, trying to get additional staff, that is an extremely challenging occupation in the city, trying to get the staff you need to do what you want to do. It is way easier to meet at commission meetings and talk about the things that you want to have or the things you demand to have. That part is the easy part. Getting the staff is the hard part. And so that's where things like a third-party inspection system comes in. Obviously, it would have to be somebody else, not city staff. If you can't even get city staff to maintain the basic things, the simple things in life, the Maslow's lowest level hierarchy stuff, not even the higher things. Okay. And I also feel a great deal of compassion for the urban forester if that position is ever funded. That they're going to have to be able to leap tall buildings in a single bound and see through walls, and from all the things that all the hopes and wishes you're heaping upon that position. I don't envy them.
Thank you. Good.
We wouldn't be here if it weren't easy. If it were easy, right?
This would have been done a long time ago.
That's right. So we're just doing what needs to be done.
All right. Well, speaking of the next thing that needs to be done, I was going to ask this to Dawn. The Urban Forest Master Plan, I was going to see if Greenworks, I know, had been working on some funding for some initial stages, and I was looking for an update on if anything else is going on with that.
Well, we were looking for funding, and we have been awarded funding, both through our contract with the City of Asheville and from the North Carolina Forest Service's Urban and Community Forestry Grant Program. And so we have, I want to say 10 or 12,000 from the North Carolina Urban Forestry Program to work on holding community meetings and working with city staff and others, elected officials, to get their input on an urban forest master plan. And Greenworks has hired, with the funding from the city, an intern, a college intern that's working with us for several weeks to look at all of the different resolutions and plans that are in place at the City of Asheville to see what connections there are for an urban forest, a comprehensive urban forest program to support. And so it's providing evidence for why we need an urban forest master plan.
All right. So we're still really working on some of the background work at this point. All right. Any other questions or comments about that right now? We'll keep pushing.
I have a really idiotic point to make. Is it not obvious with all the reports that we've had into Urban Forestry Commission, SACE, and everything that we've done that we need a master plan?
It might seem obvious to some of us, who, especially those of us who've been closest to. There are several new council members that we haven't met with to talk about this specifically, so maybe don't understand or comprehend the urgency of it. There's also to provide the not just the evidence that it makes sense in theory, but that there are goals that would be more effectively met through an urban forestry program that are already priorities in the city that have been expressed in the comprehensive plan or in the sustainability plan. So detailing those out and saying, if we have this, this will help support not only urban forestry goals, but all these other goals.
Thank you.
And that's a really good point. We're going to discuss that in more detail in a moment, but of course we're closest to this and we think that all of this is urgent, but it has come to light that we're not always connecting the dots for everyone in our community on why these things are urgent. So we'll delve into that more in just a moment. Next on the agenda is the tree canopy preservation ordinance. We know that we're continually discussing the rollout of this amendment to ensure that it's working in the way we intended, to look for possible needs for revision, and then to discuss the possibility of spending the fee in lieu money at some point down the road. I don't have a more detailed update. I'm still working with the city on gathering what parameters are available as far as creating a framework for spending that money. Like we talked about last time, some of the things we're looking at that are available with mapping programs, to dial in locations where we can do tree planting are things like, where is there canopy or lack of canopy? What is the vulnerability of the population, poverty index, racial demographics, all of these things that we can put together to create a framework for decision-making on spending that money. No specific updates or data on that now. I don't think we're in a rush to spend that fee in lieu money. There's not a lot yet, but we do want to make sure we have a framework for when we do have a chance to actually spend that. We'll be talking more about fee in lieu in just a moment in regards to open space. But does anybody have any questions? Basically for me right now, I'm just working with the city on sort of gathering parameters. But any questions or discussion as far as the tree canopy protection amendment? Sharon, go ahead.
Chris, are you on this call?
I am. I had to find the right tab there. Sorry.
So I talked to Ed. We've got a TRC going through, and what I'm finding is that on tree protection canopy areas where, let's say there's 70% coverage and only 15% needed, and the developer is only is protecting considerably more than what the 15% is. But what they're not doing is they're not calling out the trees that they're protecting within that 15%. They're just drawing a line of fencing around an area. And then they got a bunch of little dots where the trees are going to be. And I said to Ed, I said, shouldn't we be calling out these trees if they're going to be in perpetuity protected? If they're going to take that whole area, but they're only required 15%. So does that mean that all those trees are going to be saved? And if they pull them out later, they can't pull them out? What I'm coming to is 719.3 has got some holes in it. And that's not the only area that Ed and I are finding. So when we have kind of examples like this, do I send you one of my obtuse emails and say, this is what we see and how are we going to deal with it?
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate written comments on it because that helps me kind of track it. And if you have a few things, combining them into one message would be best, but we'll definitely take a look at that, whatever y'all found there.
Okay.
I guess, Ed, did you want to go next?
Yeah. I have two questions. One is, to Sharon's point, with many of the local municipalities I've worked with tree protection policy and developing tree protection plans, it's pretty common to locate the trees on the site plan that are being protected. And I think that's one of the issues that we're probably going to have to look at when we talk about, patching up 719. The other thing is, so it's probably time now that we're 7 or 8 months down the road that we maybe put in place a timeline for revisions to the Canopy amendment to fix some of those patches. So since we're on this topic, that's an issue that I'd like to raise, is that we should probably look to start doing that and having something in hand by the beginning of next year, I would think.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking that would be the timeline for the goal. Let's see what Eric had, and we can add to that. Eric, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify whether it was something that had actually gone through TRC and had received an approval, or it was something that had just been submitted and they hadn't adequately shown which trees are being protected, because as drafted, the ordinance does require them to show specifically which trees and specifically what area is going to be preserved as the tree canopy protection area. And it gets down to a level of detail of exactly what they've got to print on their plat that then gets recorded. So that's what the ordinance requires. So I don't know that this is necessarily something where the ordinance is failing. It may just be that the developer has failed to comply with it at whatever stage they're at right now in TRC.
Yeah, they're at the final TRC was, I've got it, I think it's a final, but what I did is I read the calculation on 719.3, the calculation of tree canopy, depending on how you measure it, whether you do it aerially or on the ground. So if they do ground, then the measurement of a trunk of each individual tree not grouped with other trees, are part of a tree stand. And this would be part of a tree stand because there's hundreds of trees. And they're only required to do a percentage of those hundreds, even though they're protecting with tree protecting fencing around it. So when I've had this question before with the staff and planning, saying, don't they need to identify the tree? They said, no, just the general fact that they're going over the 15%. So therefore, they're not having to identify each DBH depending on the measurement. That was my reading of it. If you've got a better reading of it and a more definitive answer on it, then I'll take it. Because it's a response now that I'm due for it to respond on at TRC.
Yeah, so the calculation methods are exactly as you said. You've got multiple options, but at the end of it, they have to be able to show that they're meeting the percentage, regardless of what method they chose to calculate it, on a final plat. So there should be a section, and it should calculate out to whatever the percentage is that's required for that site. And it should carry a note that says trees may not be removed from this area. And it's actually more definitive than that. It's not really, the question is not so much whether they're showing the individual trees or the general area that is being preserved. It's just that area meets the standard in the table and is preserved and does have the plat with a note saying that trees can't be removed from that area.
Okay, they are doing that. They're giving the square footage of the area, and they're including the note on there that is required. But they're just not labeling out 15% of the trees to which trees are being protected, just the general area and the square footage.
And I think what Eric, and Eric will say this too, but in the conversations I have with people when they evaluate which method to use for their trees, generally we end up with more protected trees and vegetation when they use the aerial method than we do when they pick them all out.
Right.
Because like Eric said, that whole area is protected in perpetuity at that point.
Okay.
So
Yeah, thank you for that, because I've had a couple of those like that. Wasn't quite sure how to deal with it.
All right, thank you. Were there other comments?
Yeah, I had
Go ahead.
one. Cecil here. The current issue of Harper's magazine in the Harper's Index shows the percentage by which the wealthiest neighborhoods in the U.S. cities have more trees than the poorest, 65%, by which the whitest neighborhoods have more trees than those that have the least white, 78%. Number of additional trees needed to fill this gap, 522 million. This sort of reaffirms what we've seen from our heat maps and our other lookings at the city of Asheville. It seems to reaffirm to me that we really need to push for the pushing of trees into our poorer neighborhoods. And the other comment I need to make right now to Chris, actually, looking at the article in the Citizen Times this week about Airbnbs, about short-term rental enforcement. The problems with short-term rental enforcement that you're dealing with are exactly the problems with tree enforcement that we're dealing with. We don't have enough people on the ground. We don't have enough enforcement of the rules. In my neighborhood, we had the guy uphill from me who raped his land. The same man owns a rental downhill from me who's doing short-term rental, multiple short-term rentals where he doesn't live, that have been reported to the city over and over again. We got to do something about enforcement, it seems to me. Thank you.
Thank you. I can let Kim address this as well. But yeah, your point about where trees are located in relation to demographics in the city is a point that has been well researched and is well taken, I think, amongst this group. However, we need to recognize that we can't just slam trees in, that it has to be a program to bring people on board,
yeah,
put trees in where they make sense. But it is, those are the factors that we need to look at when making our decisions. But Kim, I know, gave us some notes in the comments. I don't know if you had any comments to make to that as well.
Well, we've talked about in recent meetings, I've heard a move to start addressing some of the city's goals as you're working on these recommendations. And so I've linked in the chat new information, the Asheville Climate Justice Index map, as well as the presentation made by Amber Weaver of the Sustainability Office at our council meeting on September 28th. For any members of the public who would like to see these documents, they are linked by going to ashevillennc.gov, clicking on the government tab, looking at past agendas, and going to the documents for September 28th.
Thank you. Since you brought up the presentation by Amber Weaver, we did want to make a point with this group that there was no mention of trees at all in her sustainability discussion and climate justice. And I think that's a real gap that we're going to work on addressing. We are rapidly getting behind in this meeting, but I hope to get to all these key points as we get going. Dawn had a comment.
I was just going to lower my hand because I know we're short on time. But just wanted to mention real quick that Greenworks just submitted an application for a grant from the Arbor Day Foundation that focuses on racial and climate inequities in cities and using trees to address these. So we are partnering with the Housing Authority and also with the YMI and other community groups to form an advisory council to talk about the need and desire to have trees in neighborhoods and communities of color that lack them.
Perfect. And the research in this area shows that those kind of initiatives that are driven by community members themselves in coordination with local nonprofits are the most successful. So that's where this commission can then possibly feed in resources to those efforts. Probably be our best bet at actually making change. All right. Oh, and back to Ed's point about the timeline for revision on the tree canopy ordinance. So we know that we're going to talk about this later, the holidays and winter meetings, and usually there's a change up in our meeting schedule. So I would think that our goal for timeline for the revision would be, like you said, early 2022, possibly either to have something ready or close to for our February meeting. So I don't know if we want to have the policy working group work on that, or to initiate a new working group, or reignite the one that we had before to look at those revisions. So I don't know if anybody has ideas about that.
I think the folks that are on the policy working group are the ones that originally worked with the city and with Chris directly on the First Amendment. So it seems to make sense for the same players to keep working on that.
All right. Well, then maybe put that into your next meeting. And I know it's something that's already on your radar, but we can continue to collect and analyze, you know, like what Sharon was saying, in other places where we know there's those gaps. So, all right. So that brings us to working group updates. The first one is the Open Space Amendment Working Group. Before we get going with that, Eric is here and wanted to talk about the fee in lieu piece. So if we want to get an update from your group about what's been going on with your meetings, but hold off on fee in lieu discussion separately. But we can take an update on where the actual working group and task force is for open space.
So I'm not supposed to say anything about fee in lieu until Eric speaks first? Is that what you're saying, Amy?
Well, unless it was part of your meeting, you know what I mean? We'll take any.
It is. I mean, it was at the heart of the meeting. Yeah. So Eric will have to respond to me, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Okay. So here is, so there are two big kind of issues arising out of the last meeting. The first one is that Videla asked us to make a position statement and write a letter of position on the open space amendment to pass along to planning and zoning, who has a meeting in early November, which is before our November meeting. And that meeting is a prerequisite to sending, putting the P&Z stamp of approval on the open space amendment so that it may reach council at its currently scheduled date of December, the December council meeting for council's consideration. So the reason we can't do that, and the reason that's not on the agenda for today for UFC, is because we don't have a final open space amendment. And at the end of our last task force meeting last week, I guess that would have been, Videla invited all of us to make edits on the open space amendment draft again. And so we don't know where the open space amendment is going to land. And so it's sort of impossible for us to say what we think about a document that's not done, an ordinance that's not actually written yet. So we're just going to have to wait until we have a final ordinance to take a position on what we think about it. So that's the first big item. So the second big item today, to tee things up for Eric to speak for himself, is the fee in lieu provisions of the open space amendment. The big summary here is that the city attorney's office has declined to take a position on what we're allowed to do with the money for the open space amendments fee in lieu funds. And the gist of that is that there's litigation ongoing against various municipalities across North Carolina, which could end, years from now. We have no idea when this litigation will end. And so essentially the city attorney's office has taken a very risk-averse and conservative position on the expenditure of fee in lieu funds for the open space amendment. and has actually declined to say what the city attorney's office thinks about how the city may use these funds, pending the outcome of these various lawsuits across the state, which have been brought by this litigation mill legal outfit that recruited some developers to be a part of their action to challenge the way the fees were collected and how the fees might be used. So that's the summary of the discussion we got from Eric at the open space amendment task force meeting last week. And so the issue here is that, so what I've put on the agenda for today is, for your consideration, is a statement that I had to get on the agenda before I had these discussions at the open space task force meeting. And I also spoke with Janice Ashley yesterday about this. And actually it needs to be modified because at the time that I wrote this for our consideration, essentially we just had an inconsistent interpretation of the fee, what can be done with the fee in lieu funds for the tree canopy amendment, what can be done with the fee in lieu funds for the open space amendment. So originally what I had suggested that we do here today is to vote to recommend to City Council to give the City Attorney's Office direction to come up with a creative, imaginative interpretation of the fee in lieu provisions and the relevant statutes that will allow the City of Asheville to pursue its objectives immediately. So the issue here is that after my conversations with Eric and Janice, it's very clear that the City Attorney's Office is entrenched in its position to not take a position and to recommend that the city not spend its fee in lieu funds from the open space amendment. Keeping in mind that this will be a period probably of several years. It could be a period of several years before the relevant litigation is resolved. That's an obstruction. You know, the City Attorney's Office has produced an obstruction to the city's objectives to pursue with equity how we provide services and facilities to the residents of the city of Asheville. And the reason that that's an obstruction is it's not just a temporary pause on when the city can expend its resources, its fee in lieu funds on buying park spaces, open spaces, green spaces. The fact of the matter is we're in a race. The city of Asheville is in a foot race with developers for gobbling up any available real estate, which could provide the best opportunities for parks, the most equitable opportunities for parks and open spaces for the populations that need them. So in light of the fact that the longer Asheville waits to start spending its fee in lieu dollars on acquiring park space, the fewer good options the city of Asheville will have for providing the best possible parks for Asheville residents and for providing the most equitable locations for parks to serve underserved neighborhoods. Originally, I thought that we should urge City Council to issue a directive to the City Attorney's Office to say, we need you to take a position immediately. We need it to be the most creative, expansive, imaginative position you can provide to empower the city to begin spending its fee in lieu funds in the best way possible that will serve the population. However, in my conversations with Eric and my conversations with Janice, it's been made very, very clear that the City Attorney's Office is committed to its position to not take a position and to simply advise the city not to spend any fee in lieu funds on acquiring real estate for more parks and open spaces. And I think that that's just bald-faced unacceptable. We cannot sit on our hands and watch Asheville get nickel and dimed away until there are no good options left. And maybe it's 3 or 5 years from now lawsuits will continue to be filed by developers to challenge these things across the state. And the fact of the matter is, if we want to jump on the opportunity to obtain open space to serve the residents of Asheville in the best way the city can, we have to hop on it, and we have to do it now. And we can't wait around for that, for diminished opportunities and diminished returns sometime in the future when the city attorney's office deems it to be unrisky to spend that money. Sure, there are risks involved. Sure, we might get sued. That's life with developers. They love to sue people. They love to threaten to sue people and cities to get them to not do what they don't want them to do. But I think what I want to propose is that we actually vote to recommend to City Council to ignore the city attorney's opinion and proceed with expenditure of those funds in the way that the city sees fit. So that's what I'm going to move for us to vote on today. And with that, I'll turn it over to whoever wants to speak next.
So you haven't actually made a motion yet, have you?
No, that's correct. I thought there would be some discussion on this.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd like to open it up for Eric to talk about where the city is at on the fee in lieu with open space. And real quick, right now with this discussion on the open space task force, we're really actually focusing on how that open space amendment will come out and whether or not the UFC will support or not once we have a final version. The fee in lieu discussion and whatever motions we want to take with that are somewhat separate from our position on the actual open space amendment. So make that clear. Go ahead, Eric.
Sure, thank you. So wanted to give you all an update since this was touched on at your last meeting on how we spend these and why that's different than the parameters around how we would spend the tree canopy fee in lieu. And so we've had the chance to go in and look at the recent amendments through 160D and I can offer you a fuller explanation now. So previously there was only one spot in North Carolina law that talks about open space fee in lieu, and that was in the subdivision regulation section. And that statute provided that if somebody provides money in lieu of open space, the city has to use that money, quote, to acquire or develop recreation areas serving residents of the development or subdivision or more than one subdivision or development within the immediate area. And so that was the standard that we had in place prior to the adoption of 160D. And so the question that came out is, did 160D change that standard in any meaningful way? And so what 160D did is it expanded the instances in which developers can pay open space fee in lieu, but in expanding those instances past just subdivisions, they incorporated the subdivision standard by reference. So what this means is that you're subject to that same restriction on serving residents in the immediate area of the projects that they come from. And so what that is just an inherently ambiguous phrase. And so there's unfortunately no guidance on what that means. There's no School of Government publications. There's at present no case law interpreting that. There are no regulations that have been promulgated explaining what that phrase means. What there are, however, are at least 3 separate lawsuits that have been brought against North Carolina municipalities charging that they were too liberal in how they expended their open space fee in lieu, that they did not comply with that, quote, immediate area requirement. And we've looked at those lawsuits, and we know that they've been brought by the same firm that has previously sued the city in relation to its water fees. So we have a pretty high level of confidence that if we expend our open space fee in lieu monies, we'll be the next municipality to be sued. Given that we only have, I believe it's about $200,000 in that pot of money, it doesn't make good fiscal sense to take that step when the cost of any litigation is going to be largely, it's going to be likely the same amount as the fee itself. So to the extent that that's the proposition we're looking at, our recommendation is not to take that step at this time.
All right. Was that it? Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, if I'm sorry, Amy, go ahead.
Well, just to streamline this discussion, here's where my thoughts are. I don't know what, you know, obviously as a group, we can make recommendations to council in any way we see fit, specifically that would reach our goal of enhancing, preserving, and protecting tree canopy. And it obviously could be, the case could be made that open space does that. So it would be within our realm to make a recommendation on this open space fee in lieu. My concern is that if this is an amendment that's currently being worked on and going through to city council within the next couple months, is a recommendation on anything having to do with open space fee in lieu appropriate in this moment? And I totally understand what you're saying, Perrin, about how real estate, you know, it is a timely endeavor and there are limited opportunities. But I just want to put that out there that, you know, is this the right time to make that kind of recommendation to city council? So I'm just opening that up for discussion. I see Cecil and then Sharon. Cecil? You might be muted. Sharon, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think we could add Perrin's recommendation along with our recommendation to council on open space at the same time. I'm in agreement with Perrin, only because I'm sitting on this task force. And frankly, I have watched the city spend money on consultants that have cost a whole lot more, that have gotten a whole lot less results. So I think it's a gamble well worth putting out there, and I'm in agreement with Perrin.
I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand, but can I ask a question or make a comment?
Sure, Ed, go ahead.
I think the real problem is the ambiguity of, the law, defining what an immediate area is. I mean, that's an issue of scale. The whole city of Asheville, North Carolina is immediate to Western Carolina. So, you can make the argument that, it could be anything that you want it to be. And given that we don't have any immediate project to spend the open space money on, I wonder if, just like we did with the Sunset Drive thing, we decouple the fee in lieu issue from the rest of the open space revision and sort of table that until we get more information about, where this money, is intended to be spent and where the current litigation lands, because that will clear up some of the ambiguity, I think. And rather than, wrenching ourselves to make a decision when there's not enough information to make a decision with. So, I mean, I really understand where Perrin's coming from, and it's kind of important to eventually have some resolution to this issue because it affects where we stand on the open space revision. But there's just not enough information to go with at this point. So I think decoupling it might be the better thing to do at this point.
Thank you. I'm not sure who was next. Cecil, did you have a question, comment?
I don't think so. I think okay. I'm next.
Go ahead, Steve.
I think Cecil's, but he's in a vehicle or something.
Yeah, I am in a vehicle. I'm running an errand right now, but I think Perrin made the point really well.
Okay, I have a point to make. I agree with Perrin's general thrust that we need to deal with using our funds wisely in a prioritized way to have an organized open space system for the city. The whole green infrastructure issue is a major thing. Our urban forest is the largest single element in the city above ground, and yet it gets probably the least attention of anything else. Or as people tend to focus on the hardscape buildings. It's really somebody's got background noise going. Anyway, Cecil, could you mute maybe?
I muted him.
Okay. But the general idea, yes, we need to set priorities for open space and our whole green infrastructure system. The city is just not organized in that way to look at those. That's why we need an urban forest master plan to connect all these things. The city's losing opportunities continuously. And I think that's Piran's major point. We're losing these opportunities. The future city is being built right now. So I agree with Piran on the major point, and somehow we need to get that point across that the city is part of our recommendations.
Thanks, Steve. Let's see, I think Patrick?
Yes. It seems that we have Piran's points, which are well taken, and impending motion on one side. We have Eric Edgerton's legal opinion on the other side, complete opposite. So if we were to go ahead and move to make a recommendation to the city council, I'd like to get Kim's take on that, given that dichotomy. And then after that, I'm not clear, to Ed's point, how we decouple open space from the fee in lieu. So Kim, could you take on the first?
Thank you, Patrick. That's why I had my hand raised. So one of the things that I would suggest to any advisory group is when making a recommendation to council regarding instruction, a group might consider focusing on the instruction or the policy that needs to be made instead of a specific argument against a staff member. I think that you might have some success suggesting that a policy be made around the distribution of fees and open space fees in lieu, for example, understanding the dire need and the urgency. Additionally, we do have open space funds that are needing to be used, and they have a deadline. I wanted to draw attention to the bond funds. We originally had $2 million allocated for acquisition of park space. That deadline is the end of 2023, and we know that land is at a premium cost. There's not a lot of it left that can be used for that purpose, and that a previous iteration of council identified South Asheville and East Asheville with the most need. So there is a deadline. There are fees that need to be used. There is an urgency in the timeline, and I hope you'll accept my recommendation as a suggestion regarding the language.
Thank you, Kim. That was very helpful. I think Vidila was next.
Well, wait a minute. I wanted Ed to explain how we would decouple this.
Yeah, the only way I can think of doing that is to, if we approve with all the rest of the amendments to the open space amendment, then we as a commission recommend approval to the amendment with the exception of the fee, where we are with respect to fee in lieu, that we just don't have enough information and there's not enough clarity with that one issue. Or we recommend how fee in lieu gets spent along with our recommendation. I think that, I think we're pretty close to approving the amendment, and that there's just that one issue that's the stick in the mud. So we work around it somehow with our recommendation.
And I would definitely suggest, this is Kim again, I would suggest decoupling it because we have a decision before council that is sooner, the open space in general, whereas you could make a general recommendation that we need policy around distribution of open space fee in lieu, but it wouldn't have to be under the same timeline as a decision that's before council this winter.
All right. So everybody's clear on that. Currently, the Urban Forestry Commission has a recommendation to council in opposition of the open space amendment as it was written previously. But since that has been revised, we will need to take a look at that at our next meeting, hopefully once there is actually a final version that'll go to council. Then we can either vote to keep that opposition, change that into support or whatever. That's for the amendment itself. Then, as Kim is suggesting, we can look at various ways or recommendations to City Council on the actual spending of the funds of open space fee in lieu. So those are the two separate buckets. So in this moment, we actually do not have a final version of the open space amendment to make any changes to our opposition from the past, but we can discuss moving forward with a recommendation on any of these different pieces of support for how various funds would be spent and what those priorities should be for council. Does that make sense for everybody? I see that there's still hand up from Vidila and Perrin. I think Vidila was next.
Thanks. So I just wanted to chime in, I think responding to, God, I don't remember who made the comment, but about needing a comprehensive open space review, just to remind this commission that the wording amendment that we're working on is really just for open spaces, very small locations related to individual parcels. And yes, you know, it makes sense that the city at some point should do a larger comprehensive park/open space plan that's updated. But this is not that, just to be clear. And also the, you know, this was initiated to talk about the wording amendment that we're revising, not necessarily the management. I mean, I think it's great that we expanded our review to look at that, but it doesn't seem like it needs to go together because it's really a separate item. But it makes sense that you guys would chime in on that when you make a motion to council. That's it.
Thank you. All right. So I think it's back to Perrin.
So yeah, the reason why these two things are separated out is because of the city attorney's opinion about the expenditure of the funds. So the fee in lieu provision was a part of our discussions on the open space task force until this opinion came from the city attorney's office, which is what separated it out from the open space task force's review. So it was supposed to be a part of the same thing. The city attorney's opinion has prevented that from happening. That said, you know, I'm fine with having our recommendations on fee in lieu go together with our recommendations on the open space amendment to city council. I have no problems with that, and that makes sense in a variety of ways. Kim, your points are well taken about constructive input, constructive feedback to city council. Thanks for that useful advice. So yeah, there's a lot to say about all of these issues. Suffice it to say, I have a completely different reading of the statutes than the city attorney's office does. And I think the conservatism of the city attorney's opinion, legal opinion about these statutes is highlighted in those differences in how we read the statutes. You know, the statute allows for lands to be bought, like parkland, for example, to be bought to serve multiple subdivisions, multiple developments. So it's clear that it's anticipated within the statute that this could be contemplated at a sort of a broader neighborhood scale level, or, you know, resource management district level, so that multiple neighborhoods could be, or multiple developments could be served by the same park bought with that money. So there's lots of room for creativity, flexibility, boldness, courage in this relevant statutes that the city attorney's office has interpreted. But the city attorney's office has a very risk-averse position on this particular issue. That's the bottom line. They don't want to see the city take risks and then end up in litigation over the risks that were taken. I just think that has to be, that's the consideration on one side. The consideration on the other side is this race that we're in to gobble up the available real estate for parks and open spaces within the city of Asheville. So I think ultimately that's the value judgment we're going to need to bring before city council to say, we need you to be bold. We need you to take risks. We need the city attorney's office to defend litigation against the city for the decisions that have been made to pursue our policies to the best of our ability. And so, as Amy, as you suggested, these things could be bundled together. I'm fine with doing that. I think that makes a lot of sense. That also gives me time to provide my legal analysis on the statutes to the Urban Forestry Commission, so you all can see a different perspective on how the exact same language can be interpreted to courageously pursue the city's priorities for parks and open space in an equitable way for all of our residents. So we don't need to resolve it today. And I'll work on that analysis of the statutes that the city attorney's office has interpreted for your review on the commission.
All right. Thanks, Perrin. And just something to keep in mind is that we are not, as a group, deciding how any money is being spent. We are, again, providing recommendations to city council. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is whether or not the city's attorney's office supports or does not support a specific, budget line item is actually not necessarily the concern of this group. If we have a recommendation, we see something that we think council can do that supports their strategic vision, we can make that recommendation. Does that make sense? That they don't necessarily have to be tied together. I totally understand your frustration, especially as a lawyer, you're seeing it through that lens. But we can make our recommendations, but we really need to be aware that we have a goal of preserving and protecting tree canopy, and that those are the recommendations we should send to council in that framework of how it would meet their priorities and the city priorities of urban forests. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, Amy. Thanks for that. And I think that that's a constructive way to look at it. I also think, Kim, if you would be, as our council liaison, perhaps when this comes up for discussion, you can give the extra context that's needed, because I imagine the city attorney's office is deferred to by city council as regularly. And so bringing these sort of competing priorities into relief for the council would also be helpful as you're discussing it on council.
I do appreciate the invitation. I will acknowledge that as your liaison, I am carrying forward recommendations that are official from this body. So I can't bring forward a recommendation from this body if a motion is not made. I'll also note that it's pretty rare that we have a governance committee which addresses new policies for the city of Asheville scheduled, but we have one scheduled next Tuesday at 3:00.
All right, thanks, Kim. So I was just making a note of the governance committee meeting. All right, and you said next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Okay. Any other comments at this time for open space? Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, just to note that got to push back against the characterization of being risk adverse here. We take risks all the time in our office. It's just a risk aware situation. So when we know that a law firm that has previously sued the city has sued 3 other municipalities under just the theory that there's no way to define what immediate area means, we know that we will be sued again. And so there's always the calculation of whether it's worth it to incur that cost. And that's certainly a policy discussion that can be had. But to deny the outcome here would be to just deny reality. I mean, that's going to be an incurred cost if you do go forward with that course. But if that's one that the city wants to bear, that's always something that we'll advise on and take direction on.
Appreciate that. Thank you. All right. And so we'll look next month for hopefully a final version of the open space amendment and have our discussion on that. And then also, if Perrin or anyone else wants to frame a recommendation to council in regards to how the funds are spent, we can look at that as well. All right. That brings us to the policy working group. Before we go there, it is a little past 3 p.m. already. And so obviously we're going over schedule. Just wanted to offer up if anybody needs a break or anything, let me know. We're just going to keep going and see if we can get through the rest of the agenda. So the policy working group, Ed, if you want to bring us up to date on chapter 20 and the standards and specs.
Yeah, we already kind of updated you on the standards and specs, and I'm going to do this in 30 seconds or less. The policy working group met with the city on our proposed revisions to chapter 20. Public Works and Development Services and the city attorney's office met with us. And by and large, they like the recommended changes that we're making. We have some structural issues that we have to deal with, and we're probably going to schedule a meeting within the next 7 days to start addressing those recommendations. Patrick, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay, we can move on. Amy.
Thank you. I would say that if we're close to a point where maybe the entire group could see the revisions or comment on them, I know, there's that fine line with a bunch of drafts and not, but maybe keep that in mind that we do at some point need to bring this to the entire group.
After we make this next set of structural changes and revisions based on the comments from the city, I think we'll have something we'll be ready to share with the rest of the group.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, next is the TRC working group, which is me and Sharon. And I just wanted to update everyone that we're going to be taking this working group off for now. I think I've seen what I need to see at TRC. And again, I cannot say enough about the work that Sharon's doing. It really needs to be a staff level job, the work that she's putting into that. And so that'll be the, I guess, recommendation going forward is that it's good to have a seat at the table to have the oversight, but it is a lot to put on a volunteer. So we're going to take this working group off for now and see if we can find other ways to address that workload between the UFC and the city.
Just a comment, Sharon's work with TRC is proof that somebody's able to leap tall buildings with a single bound. So thanks, Sharon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's amazing. Thank you, Sharon.
Exactly.
All right. The budget request working group. So we do have some discussion here. Patrick, did you want to get us started on where you're at with that?
Yeah. So based on some communication back and forth between our council liaison, Kim Roney, and Amy, myself, and I believe Perrin, Kim was suggesting that the Urban Forestry Commission be a little more proactive in terms of sending resolutions and recommendations to the city council to show that we are an active group in terms of making recommendations and giving advice to the city council. So the budget working group took those communications to heart. We debated whether to draft a resolution or a recommendation to the city council. We came down on the side of a recommendation because it says to the council our intent in terms of recommending a comprehensive urban forestry program, which would include an urban forester and an urban forest master plan, as opposed to a resolution, because a resolution would then get presented to the council for a vote, and we weren't quite ready for any council action at this time. So I was asked to draft a recommendation, which I did. Ed and Amy looked at it and made some revisions. I think Amy asked the rest of the commission to take a look at it and come up with any recommendations or comments on the recommendation. So I assume the recommendation is going to be before us for a vote. Is that correct, Madam Chair?
Yeah, we have that specific item in new business if we
New
want to
business?
wait till we get there.
Okay.
So I guess for right now, whatever other work the working group is doing, we can update now, and then we'll circle back around.
Right. So that's our main focus right now. I'm going to ask Nancy if she could, and I'm going to do this very quickly because I know time's a factor here, to put up the PowerPoint presentation that I sent to her and Haley. And I'm doing this because I would like this PowerPoint presentation to be part of the documents for this meeting. And I believe that Amy mentioned earlier in the meeting that there was a PowerPoint presentation on climate justice given to the City Council meeting last Tuesday on climate justice initiative. And I'm just going to I was going to go through the presentation, but I only beseech the commission members to please, once this posted, to go back and look at it, because it does represent missed opportunities for us, for the Office of Sustainability, for the Sustainability Advisory Committee on Energy and the Environment, and for Development Services to better integrate our respective priorities and initiatives. And I will be addressing this at the next budget working group meeting. But I'll leave it at that. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to answer those, and we can move on to new business. I also wanted to bring this up because I have an amendment to the proposed letter of recommendation to the City Council. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Does anybody else have any comments at this time on the budget request working group? My only thing to ask of the working group is, and I'm sure you're considering this, but in what ways do we plan to leverage community support and engagement for our budget requests? I don't know if there's any current plans. Do we have another tree symposium of some sort or something like that? What other ways can we engage the community to have that bottom down or bottom up effect to push up to City Council? So just some ideas at this point. But
okay,
I see nodding. So yeah, I know you have that on your radar, but
yeah, we were sort of moving in that direction until we got sort of sidelined on working on this recommendation.
Understood. All right. Anything else there for now? We'll revisit this in a moment. Which brings us to a legislation update. Patrick, while we have you, just really briefly, what can you tell us about if there's anything new on SB 349 and HB 496? I know they got rolled over, but
no update or additional information on SB 349. On House Bill 496, as I mentioned in previous meetings, that got rolled into the major appropriation or budget bill, Senate Bill 105. That passed the Senate. There was differences between the appropriation bill passed by the Senate and the House. It went to a conference committee. As far as I know, the language for 496, which would require local governments to pass tree or prevent local governments from passing tree protection ordinances without the express local enabling authority authorization from the General Assembly. Is still in the budget bill. Last week, the conference committee met with the governor to go over the budget bill. There was going to be some recommendations that everything other than appropriations be excluded from that bill, which not only included this HB 496, but other non-appropriation language as well. The conference committee, by Republican control rules, are secret. So nobody has seen the appropriation bill that went to the governor. And we don't know what the outcome of the discussions between the conference committee and the governor has been. My last email that I got from Senator Julie Mayfield, which was yesterday, said essentially, we know nothing. So that's my report.
Okay. Well, thank you for the update. We'll keep an eye on it. All right. Last on old business is the Urban Place UDO. Where are we at with that? Has it been to City Council? I know it was in the news again.
So yes, the Urban Place form code went before the City Council last week. Both the form code and the redistricting language, redistricting maps that correspond with the phase 1 of urban center proposals were all approved by the City Council. The city did take out one proposed location because of concerns from the local neighborhood association, which is comprised mainly of people of color. And I don't know if Vidila is still here and can advise us on this, but the last I talked with Planning and Urban Design, they were going to go to the City Council with phase 2 of the Urban Center initiative, probably either sometime late this year or beginning of next year. As part of that phase 2, we've been working on how to address the urban canopy coverage for urban center projects. We do have a proposal on the table that would, instead of dealing with that in the form code language, that we would deal with that in the Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance, Section 719, by establishing a third category of urban centers and requiring in that category a minimum urban tree canopy coverage of 25%. We need to go back with to Planning and Urban Design, along with Eric Edgerton, to work out the details on that so that we can get that UDO amendment to 719 ready to include in the package of other UDO amendments related to the Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance that we'd like to present to council sometime early next year.
All right. Well, thank you. So did everybody catch that? We'll add a piece of 719 to address that canopy cover issue that'll encompass the Urban Place form code. All right. Kim, good.
Sorry to keep interrupting. I just wanted to let y'all know that we have a like a draft planning calendar. And the phase 2 for Urban Place is penciled in for November 9th. So it may be before next year.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
So we got to move quickly.
All right. So that brings us to new business. First, we had a request to talk about the Ravenscroft Reserve Initiative from Dawn.
I'm going to table my request.
All right. Let me know if we're going to put that on a future agenda.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next is the budget request recommendation and resolution that Patrick mentioned before. So we have the draft. Hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at it. And then Patrick, you said you had a revision.
Yeah, could we possibly put that up so people could look at it pretty quickly?
Nancy, do you think you could put that up for us? Sorry, the draft resolution or recommendation, pardon me. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, not that one. See, just the other link.
Which draft is?
It's draft CUFP. It's under the budget request recommendation resolution, that link. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get to it in a moment while Nancy's pulling that up. Most people are aware, as was mentioned previously, that we were looking at letting City Council see us a little more visibly. And the first of these current set of recommendations that we thought would be appropriate to move up to City Council is a recommendation that supports our budget request of an urban forester and an urban forest master plan. So Patrick wrote up this recommendation. Patrick, do you want to go ahead with your change or revision?
Yeah, if we could scroll down to goals for a greener Asheville, 50% canopy by 2020 and climate justice. And specifically to item 4. So this, what I'm going to propose goes to my comments previously about the PowerPoint presentation by the Office of Sustainability in conjunction with the Sustainability Advisory Committee on Energy and the Environment, which, as Amy pointed out, made no reference to urban forestry, a comprehensive urban forestry program, an urban forester, an urban forest master plan, the Urban Forestry Commission, or just plain trees, importance they have in combating climate justice. And I think we need to do a much better job of coordinating, as I mentioned before, our priorities and initiative. So in the spirit of that,
Nancy, if you scroll down just a little more, we're on number 4. He wants to look at the next part. Sorry, Patrick.
That's okay.
So we can see where you're adding. There we go. Appreciate that. Okay. Thank you.
So in item 4, begin erasing the disproportionate impact of climate inequities on low-income neighborhoods and communities of color by, and I'd like to amend this to add the words, working with the City Office of Sustainability, the Sustainability Advisory Committee on Energy and the Environment, and any other relevant city department, office, board, or commission to integrate, and strike the word integrating, the comprehensive urban forestry program, including reforestation plans for these neighborhoods, into a climate justice initiative.
All right. So that would be the change there. So we can discuss this entire document and the intention or wording behind it. So it looks like Ed first.
Yeah, one of the key components of an urban forest master plan will be to forge integration between and amongst various departments and interests within the city. So I think revising point number 4 is, as Patrick suggested, makes a lot of sense. And I am prepared to make a motion that we approve as amended after we have some further discussion.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Better turn this on. Yeah, I appreciate this write-up, and I in general agreement with it. I have a couple of questions. As far as we sent a resolution to City Council last year, zero net loss resolution, which was passed by City Council. And I realize we have new City Council members now. The status of a resolution, it implies in this write-up at the first, at the end of the situation part, that is city policy, the zero net loss resolution that we sent. I don't think it's actually city policy. It's by resolution, we can reference it. If the city council passed it, I'd be happy if it was considered policy, but I don't think it's technically city policy yet. It was a resolution with the goal of having zero net loss. Is that actually city policy? That's the question, I guess. What status does a resolution have in city policy?
That is an excellent question that I have been wondering myself.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Kim, if you can.
If it's city policy, then a lot of this is already established. In other words, the points we made last year in that resolution were to have a comprehensive urban forestry program. And that is by resolution, the goal of city council already. It's just a matter of funding it. But that is, but they're new city council members. So if a resolution by a past city council is still intact when it goes to a new city council, that's another issue also.
That's a good point, Steve. So from my experience, but also looking up the difference of the two, I wouldn't want to give any misinformation. So I'm happy to get the information as an exact answer and send it forward to this full group when I send forward my report to council. But from my memory and the definition, a resolution can be an adopted statement, affirmation, agreement, acknowledgement, but is not the same as a policy.
Right. That's my understanding. It's not official policy. It's a kind of we're striving to do this sort of thing. We're striving to do this. So I would change the wording in here in this statement to say, by resolution, the city agreed with this, with this goal of a zero net loss, and many of the things that are already in this, write-up. But it's not official city policy right now.
I would interject here that one of my frustrations of 8 years on council was that a resolution is not policy.
Yeah. but I think we need to say the city council isn't agreed with these goals, but we're reiterating that agreement in saying, hey, let's we're continuing to tell city council and advise them the same way we have in the past, but we would like to see follow through. I mean, that's the gist of what we're saying, I think.
So, Madam Chair, it might be helpful if Steve would also recommend amending that language.
I would just simply say that the city council agreed with stipulation in their city council agreed by resolution of in appropriate wording. We'll let you on the wording. Just
where are you looking at it, Steve? Is it at the very top? I think
the last part of
the situation adopted the
right,
got it.
Right. Just to
change it
clarify
from
that. Just to clarify that.
It looks like we would just need to change policy to resolution.
Right. Some words to that effect. The rest I'm absolutely fine with. I think it's perfect because we've written some of this before. This is kind of a restating what we said before, and just bringing it forward once again to the attention of city council. Say, hey, you guys agreed with this before. We're just pushing for follow through here. Let's keep this and let's coordinate. Let's get it all on sustainability issues on the table together, so that this is all connected. And I think that's a very important point that Patrick made there.
So Madam Chair, I will accept. Well, I guess Ed, have you made it a motion yet?
I will right now. I move that we forward this, that we approve this recommendation and forward it to City Council with the 2 amendments as suggested.
And a second?
I second that.
All right. Well, then we can vote unless there's more discussion. All right. All right. So roll call vote. Patrick?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
Cecil?
Aye.
Perrin?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So the motion to forward the recommendation to fund a city forester and urban forest master plan will pass to City Council with the revisions. Patrick and I will get those revisions to Nancy and Haley to get through to City Council. All right. Awesome. So again, where this came from was a broader discussion initiated by Kim Roney. Thank you for letting us know that despite all the work we do, it's not necessarily visible to others. It was a little frustrating to hear that and sad, it made me wonder, why don't they know what we're doing, how hard we're working, how many hours we all put in on these issues. And so it brought to my mind this bigger picture of, how do we increase our visibility and make sure that this word is getting out. The specific items that were brought up by Kim was moving recommendations and resolutions up to council. And I'm still working on getting some clarification on exactly what are the differences. My concern was always, could we over recommend? Could we over saturate council with recommendations and resolutions to the point where if we have one that's really important, if we really want this one thing, will that get lost in the shuffle if we're always putting recommendations forward? However, I do think it's a good idea for us to be more visible and ensuring that City Council and others can see, again, the work we're doing and make sure that it is out in front. So when this was coming down this month, I sort of had just a brain dump that I went ahead and added as notes to this meeting, with two pieces. The first was a list of ways that this body is important, and you can link to it through the agenda. Just, what do we do as the Urban Forestry Commission? How valuable is this volunteer group? And I think I laid out a bunch of items here. I know you guys may have more, so this is a working document. And then the second part of this is some of the priorities and positions that we have discussed starting, several years ago, but that we reiterated at our last annual retreat. And this could be maybe the basis of what our future recommendations to council might look like. I don't know if we want to set a goal of, one per month or just as they come up, but this included things like this budget request, so I think this is a great place to start with moving this up to council. But do we want to, for example, get a commitment or put something on the radar for the importance of heritage trees or the structure of the fee and lieu programs? So all of these things are just on the table as far as discussion on how we want to format and frame these conversations going forward. So this can just be discussion at this point. So I saw that Patrick, I don't know who was first there. Go ahead.
I'll let Perrin go ahead.
I didn't raise my hand.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, thought I saw it. Go ahead, Patrick.
So I agree with everything that you said, Amy. I'm going to, now that we passed this letter of recommendation, I'm going to recommend to the budget working group that a member of the Urban Forestry Commission and or Ben Woody put together a PowerPoint presentation to the City Council that not only encompasses the points of this recommendation, but also, and particularly with an emphasis on climate justice, but also emphasizing the past work that the Urban Forestry Commission has done to make Asheville a better city.
All right. I like the idea of a presentation to council. What's the reality of that? I'm just not familiar with how that process might work. So I don't know if Kim can enlighten us, or Cecil.
I have seen presentations to council from a board or commission that usually comes with some sort of annual report, but recommendations can certainly come from the liaison, which I'll commit to do. And then also any member of this group could reach out, especially the chair and or the vice chair, to the mayor to request that for a future agenda.
Okay. Well, I love that idea. I'm happy to present and talk about trees at any time. So I think
I'm sorry. I think that timing is very important too, as we're moving into the budget cycle, that we get our thoughts on the table as early as possible and make our points as poignant as possible. So
I'll also add a personal thing that I've offered to do to the chair and vice chair, but to this whole group, is that when I send these reports, whenever you make recommendations, like you did with the properties today, and with this budget recommendation, that instead of just sending it to the chair and vice chair, I'll just copy each of the group members so that you can follow up with each member of council if you need to make sure that we received it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good.
So
Go
ahead, Cecil.
As I attempted to interject a moment ago, I'd be happy to put together or help put together a PowerPoint sort of presentation about what we do.
All right, we lost a little bit of your audio, but it sounded like you want to work on a presentation for council. Excellent. I do as well. Would anyone else be interested in working on that? We can form a small working group, and then we could bring it to the larger group as well. But Perrin? All right. And I agree with Ed's point. The timing is important. So I would think sooner than later would be good. You know, we have this recommendation for the budget request going up. If we could get in front of city council and talk to, you know, the existing members sooner than later, I think that would get it on the radar for this budget cycle. Does that make sense? Or
Yes.
okay. All right. Well, then I will reach out with Perrin and Cecil, and we'll see if we can put together something rapidly. And I'll reach out to the mayor and see how we can coordinate to get on the agenda and when that might happen. All right. Any other discussion around that? Feel free to read my notes, and you can reach out to me, or, you know, through discussion or email, send future ideas and suggestions. Yeah, Perrin?
Yeah, so Amy, I thought you did an excellent job of synthesizing a lot of the main ideas of what we're after on UFC in that document. Definitely endorse everything, you know, said there and in Patrick's document as well. And this budget item, I just think is a special one, the urban forester and plan. And, you know, I think we can think about this. And I agree with you, Amy, that there's a point at which we'll saturate city council with our recommendations, and then they'll all just kind of blend together and lose some of their punch. But I think on the budgeting issue, we have to think about this almost from a campaign mindset. You know, this isn't just a one and done kind of a thing. We have to kind of introduce it and then reinforce it and continue to reinforce it. And so I think it is going to take multiple missives to city council to sort of make sure that what's happened in prior years, which is that by the time we realize what's going on, we're so behind the work that council's already done on the budget that we sort of get left out. And so, yeah, it's great to see us getting proactive and sort of getting an early start. And I think that's what it's going to take to finally get our request in line so that it actually makes it through the process this time. So yeah, I think it's going to be a bigger effort, and it's going to take a long time, and that's a good thing because we need to campaign on this with council.
All right. Yeah, I agree with your point that it's as many facets as we can give it is helpful. Anybody else?
Well, I would note that it's in the Citizen Times this week. There was an article about the disparity in the environmental situation for different neighborhoods in Asheville. I mean, and it was amazing to me that the article did not mention the work we've done. You know, for instance, the heat island effect that was shown with the NASA participation. But I mean, it is currently on the city's plate. So I don't know.
Yeah, we need to tie in
I'm
our work.
surprised actually that the Citizen Times article didn't somehow connect.
Yeah. Well, they're just going off of the current work that's being done with the Climate Justice Initiative, which is very specific, but I do think it can be somewhat expanded to include urban forestry as a piece of that puzzle. So, speaking of that, I pulled up one thing that we can focus on, the city council priorities that they've put in place for the past few years, and they update with bullet points of how they have tried to meet their goals and strategies in their focus areas. And the two that we can focus on that, unfortunately, in all these pages of notes, there's no bullet points about trees at all. But under a clean and healthy environment and a well-planned and livable community, we can easily insert bullet points on where we have made progress already to meet those city council priorities, and then how working within an urban forestry and green infrastructure framework does meet those priorities as well. So we can put that in our presentation to council. So everybody can see it. All right. Anything else? The last
Not
item,
to take up more time, but the trees and the heat index are both mentioned in the story in the attached document. So check out the attached documents.
Good, thank you.
What is it, Kim, that you just, what's the document?
So I'll send it at the end of the meeting, but if you go to the
Okay.
climate justice map, it mentions the heat vulnerability index. It also links to the Asheville Climate Resilience Resource Guide, which mentions heat as well as trees.
Thanks.
Good, thank you. All right.
And it will also
The last,
be attached in your minutes. I've attached both of those links. Since you put them in the chat, I attached them to the minutes.
oh, thank you. All right, anything else? I don't want to cut anybody off, sorry. Do we have our last line item? I just briefly wanted to mention that we have the upcoming meetings at the end of the year. Normally in December, we do not have a meeting. We have a get together. But that's usually because our meeting fell later in the month. And so I wanted to get input from this group if we would like to have a regular meeting in December, since it'll be that first week of December, and then potentially change our January meeting, because that'll be that first week right after New Year's Day. Potentially change our January meeting to a non-regular meeting and have our annual retreat toward the end of January. So I don't know if there's any discussion. We don't necessarily have to decide this minute since we're really over on time, but wanted to bring that up to just start looking at your calendar and think about how we might want to structure those meetings. Sharon?
I like it. I think it works.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, good idea about a possible December meeting. I'll be going off of commission this year. This will be my last year, so you'll be. I'm not sure if I think I'm not going off, but recruiting new member, whatever.
Yeah, December we'll have to talk about our
right.
officers and membership.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
All right.
I've never understood why we don't have meetings around the holiday. So I've as many meetings as possible.
Got it.
Is my view.
All right. And that, I mean, if there's alternative compliance, it makes sense to me to hold the meeting so that those folks don't have to wait a whole extra month. So, but we can look at the calendar though for January, because it may not make sense depending on how the holidays fall, for a meeting at the beginning of January, but we could have our retreat, which I think would be nice to have right at the beginning of the year, maybe a couple weeks into January. So for now, keep it in your mind and check your calendars, and we can revisit and finalize that next month, so we have some time.
Also, just so you know, the meeting in January, city is closed the Friday before and the Monday before.
For Thanksgiving. And
No, for New Year's. It's city holiday.
Oh, for January.
For January.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, December. Got it. Makes sense. Thank you. All right. Anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a
Second.
All right. Oh, we missed. There are updates in the minutes from the Tree Protection Task Force, so check those out. So we will vote to adjourn with Patrick.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Sharon.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Cecil.
Hi.
Perrin.
Aye.
Dawn.
Aye.
And I say aye. Thank you, everybody. I apologize for going over. It's the first one. I've gone long. So
Was that